Everybody, and welcome to today's session. Although we touched on these topics and 100 others, I think we've got a discussion point of something that definitely needs to have long discussions and get some dancers involved in, and that is, are we doing the right thing? Today's topic is one that we're revisiting on request, and it's about smooth dancing. I had a number of discussions recently and they were saying, oh, smooth dancing. And it dawned on me that everybody was talking about what is smooth dancing. And the answers are right hand, left hand, left hand, no sudden change of direction and constant movement. And that's what people view smooth dancing as. And that's, again, like the discussion, a focus solely on the choreography, but it's not. It's so much more than that. So this is why we're having this presentation. So when I talk about smooth dancing, we have to ask, what does it mean when a dancer says a collar is smooth and this collar is rough? Now, I'm quite certain that doesn't mean that, all the dancers have gone up to the collar and run their hands all over their body to say, hey, that collar feels smooth and this collar feels rough. It's like, as in the graphic, the difference between feeling a spinning watermelon and feeling a cactus. That's not what they're talking about. And of course, we all know that when they refer to a smooth collar, that's a collar that makes the dancing flow. It's comfortable to dance to. And while a rough collar, although the choreography may be interesting, is stop and go, it's jerky, it has constant and awkward changes in body movement and all that other kind of stuff. And that's why they consider it rough. This aspect, or the sensation of smooth, is made up of many collar factors and a few dancer factors. And while we cannot always control a bad dancer, we can control a lot of those aspects of the job that we have in the presentation of our calling. So smooth in this context is not only coming from good timing and delivery of the calls, but also to feel smooth. The collar's got to place the body, the hands, if used in the position at the end of it, be ready to start the next action without sharply changing a direction or changing an aspect of motion unless it's intentional. And this aspect of the sensation of smoothness is going to result in proper body flow and hand availability. So that is a resultant aspect of being prepared and doing what you're supposed to do. The second part of smooth is about choreography. And although it's important, we're going to leave that part to the end of the presentation. Now, if I were to try and define smooth dancing in a simple manner, what I'd say is it's defined as a dance action which allows the dancers to move comfortably and without abrupt changes of direction or excessive stops, with steps and pauses that match the beat of the music. And notice I said steps and pauses. Now, when it comes down to this, you as a caller control 90% of the conditions that make up smooth dancing. So for this to happen, the definition has to be broken down into two parts. Each of these is definable and each of these is actionable as a condition of smooth dancing. And they are, one is the physical comfort of the movement, which allows the dancers to move in a natural way. And number two is the physical dance action that should allow the dancers to match their steps to the beat of the music. Now, of these two conditions, too often callers focus their presentation on either quirky or simple or redundant choreography, or they try to regurgitate someone else's calling without understanding why it was smooth in the first place. So I've used this as an illustration graphic. So try and picture smooth, and when you talk a smooth dance, as a full meal. Now, in a meal, there's a lot of preparation that goes into making the meal. There's a lot of work that goes into choosing the right ingredients, checking the recipe, seeing how it's mixed, tasting it, seeing how it works together, seeing how the flavors blend, support, and don't contrast with each other, deciding how to cook each one of those ingredients and how to blend them where and when needed, and finally, how to present them to your guest. And that includes the sauces that go with the meal, what the table setting looks like, the presentation. And at the end, after all of that work that goes into it, you end up with a well-balanced, colorful, beautiful meal that's seasoned and exactly the same as a dance. You've got your styling, you've got your timing, you've got all the other aspects, you've got your training, you've got your call analysis, you've got what I want to do, you've got the body flow, the mechanics, the kinesiology, and all of that, which is what you choose to make up the choreography. And the choreography is only the part that you present. If you have choreography and you don't present it properly and you don't do all that, you're just basically regurgitating. I'm going to take Bob Elling's choreography because he's got some beautiful stuff, and I'm just going to copy it, put it down in front of me, and I'm going to put some music on and call it. I'm just regurgitating. And you know what? The dancers are having a hard time because I have not taken the time to do everything else that is needed to make smooth. It's not just choreography. The meal itself, like calling, has hours of preparation. It's got time put into display. It's got time put into the presentation to make it appealing and present it in an appealing manner so that the flavor has no sharp flavor contrasts, or the dance has no sharp movement contrasts. It has a variety of colors, or it has some interest in the choreography. It's got a variety of flavors. It's got a theme, but it's balanced off with other things, just like choreography. All these things teal the palate. And although each one is different and appealing, it tastes great. The whole thing makes you feel good and makes you want to return to that restaurant and have that meal again, or return to that caller and dance to them again, even if they present the same stuff, because they know what they're doing. To reproduce that smooth by regurgitation basically means somebody else has done all the work. I'm going to take it. I'm going to chew it up. I'm not going to swallow it. I'm going to spit it into a bowl and give it to the dancer, or give it to the customer. It's all the same ingredients. It's all the same food, but I put no time and effort into it. Although it's exactly the same meal in its core and component parts, you have to ask yourself, which meal would you rather eat, as opposed to which caller would you rather dance to? Okay, so as you can see, regurgitation, with regurgitation, this is exactly what we're doing if we focus solely on choreography, which is only one of the important factors of achieving smoothness. And it's not the most important thing to consider. Choreography affects the kinesiology, or the way that the body moves, but it's only one of what I consider the 5 principal factors that, like a well-balanced meal, create a smooth dance. The principles of smoothness are a team of activities that must, just like in a meal, all blend together and work together in harmony to create what we call smooth. So let's take a quick look at each one of these. The first one is timing. Smooth is fundamentally about timing. And the goal of timing is to allow the dancer to start moving on the first beat of the musical phrase, and then move smoothly and without interruption until the dance action has been completed. Any pauses or stop actions are an inherent part of the choreography or the choreographic movement, and thus these don't affect the ability to move with the music without interruption. A good example would be swing through. Half right, 2 dancers are static, they're stopped, there's a pause. It's a deliberate pause while the other 2 dancers are moving. It's a deliberate pause that does not affect the timing and the ability to work with that music. They're working with the music without interruption, even though there's a stop action. It's part of the movement. The aspect of timing for the callers to be aware of in order to let the dancers achieve smooth, well, we've talked a great deal about those in other sessions, but we're going to quickly recap them. You got to start with command and delivery timing. How long is it going to take me to say the name of the next call to keep the dancers moving on that beat? I've given them the first beat. How long is it going to take me to do that? Most calls take 2 beats of music. Some take longer. Square through, 2 beats. Spin, chain, and exchange the gears, 4 beats, maybe 5, depending on how you're going to deliver it for effect. You have to be aware of that, because you've got to know how far ahead you've got to start saying it in order to give the dancers that first beat so they can carry on with the next step. That takes us to lead time. Lead time is exactly what we're talking about. How far ahead of the finish of the movement that they're doing does that caller need to allow the dancers to do the next one without rushing or without stopping? If I say head square through and a right and left through and swing through, terrible choreography, but all of a sudden they're going, oh, what am I doing? I'm so far behind, I'm going to rush. Or if I go head square through and then 20 beats later, because I've got a slow dancer on the floor, swing through. Oh, wait a minute, what's going on? I'm moving too slow. My timing and how much time I give them, or head square through 20 beats later, I've got everybody standing still until I think of what. My lead time is not allowing for smooth. You have to consider the command time here because it tells you how far back you have to start your delivery to make the proper lead time. And the third part of timing, quite simply, is the execution time. How long is it going to take those dancers to perform that movement? How many beats of music does it take? Because from knowing that, square through from a static square, 12 beats. Square through from a box of 4 in action, 10 beats. You need to know that because from that, you can properly calculate the lead time and how long it's going to take and where you have to start saying the next command. The caller must get those 3 aspects of timing correctly if it's going to work for the dancers. If you don't get that correct, you won't achieve smooth. And you know what? Nothing in there. I didn't talk about any movement of choreography other than examples. That's got nothing to do with choreography. It's got to do with understanding the choreography and understanding the movements, but it's got nothing to do with how you're putting it together. Tempo. Smooth is about tempo. Tempo is not about how fast or slow the dancers are moving. It's about pace, the pace in which the dancers can capably perform the movements and remain on the beat. So it's the number of beats of music it takes to perform one action. Tempo and moving to the music, i.e. walking on the beat, is one aspect of dancing that is too often overlooked. But if callers spent more time on it at the beginning, join hands, make a ring, walk to the beat, shuffle your feet, get them moving on it, you're going to find that most of the problems of dancing would melt away. That ability to walk on the beat or with the tempo is the magical dancer's sensation of speed that allows them to dance to the music that is either seemingly fast or seemingly slow. Now, to put that into perspective, a movement that takes 10 beats of music at a fast tempo still takes 10 beats of music at a slow tempo. It's affected by both the timing, the delivery, and by the tempo. But people say, oh, 120 beats of music, that's too slow to dance. 130 beats of music, that's too fast to dance. Here's the difference. That sound that I just made is longer than the difference in the beats between 120 and 130. Okay. The difference between calling 7 64-beat phrases of music at 120 beats per minute and the same phrase at 130 beats per minute is 8.96 seconds. So there's 8 seconds in a musical phrase. Or sorry, in 7 phrases. A whole singing call. From the start of circle left to bow to your partner, 448 beats, there's 8.96 seconds. That's the difference between 120 and 130 beats per minute. That means each figure, head square through 4 hands, do side do, swing through, boys run, bend the line, right and left through, flutter wheel, slide through, swing your corner, promenade, all the way around, is the difference at 120 to 130 is 1.28 seconds. In other words, 1 Mississippi. That's it. You don't even get to finish the I on Mississippi. 1 Mississippi. You get 1 Mississippi. That's the difference. Now, if you want to prefer, that's 2/100ths of a second per beat. That's the total difference in time. That's not a lot. You can't even perceive that in your head. But it makes a difference because of the perception of speed that it gives. And it's that perception of speed, which if you teach your dancers to walk with the beat and walk on tempo, 90% of the problems are eliminated if they can do that and learn that early. That's why tempo is so important. Unfortunately, too many callers mistake tempo for, oh, they're moving so slow, I better give them 20 beats of music to do that square through. If it takes them 20 beats of movements to learn square through, fine, take 20, but get them dancing it at 10 or from a static square at 12 and make them dance it at that speed. The third principal factor is anticipation. Anticipation is something that should be both encouraged and discouraged And that's up to the caller to know where and when to do that. There are essentially three types of anticipation that you as a caller need to be aware of. The first one is that encouraged or prompted anticipation. This is often seen in rhyming patterns that encourage the dancers to anticipate a certain call is coming. For instance, lines up to the middle and back you float. What's next? Load the boat. Or lines go forward and back you reel, pass through, wheel and deal. You're setting them up to anticipate, swing through without a stop. And then what you get is the deliberate break on that swing through without a stop, do the right and left through. Do that too often, you'll really irk the dancers. But if you do it often enough, you get that, here it comes. I know what's coming. I'm ready for it. It's going to happen. Here it comes. The second is conditioned anticipation. Conditioned anticipation is the continued use of rhymes and calls and phrases which have been so often done that they've developed a conditioned response from the dancer that it doesn't just include the rhyming scheme. It includes how you set up something, how you phrase something, or a routine or a sequence that you constantly use. For instance, I know one caller that always uses, do the right and left through, send her back with a flutter wheel. Always uses that phrase. As soon as they say send her, they've already started doing the flutter wheel. Pass the ocean, ladies trade. Common sequence. I know another caller that will never call a pass the ocean without calling a ladies trade on it. It's just, oh, that's good flow. It was turned. Do the right and left through. Ladies lead. Now, is it going to be a flutter wheel or what? No, but depending if you have that conditioned anticipation and all you do is ladies lead Dixie style, they're going to start doing that constantly. That's a conditioned or a trained anticipation, which you can use in your to your advantage or to the dancer's detriment. But if you're going to use it with a purpose. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with helper words. There's nothing wrong with rhyming patterns. In fact, they should be encouraged and they should be used appropriately. They're a tool and they need to be used properly to encourage the dancers to listen and to react properly to the movements and not the rhyming patterns or the anticipation words. That's why you need to use them properly, because dancers are going to be listening to up to the middle and back you reel, up to the middle and back you float. And if you don't say it, they're just going to dance it anyway. If that happens, you know you've done it wrong, but you can help them. The third one is instinctive anticipation. At a halfway dance a few years ago, I was listening to one of the callers and I was talking to another caller on the floor, and I was just watching, and it was so beautiful. And I wish I had the routine down. It might have been Mike Davey or it could have been Howard Coburn, but they were calling, and the caller I was talking to, I could tell what the next call was going to be because there was really no other option for the dancers to do. He had such a beautiful flow in this sequence that you could see what was coming next. And even if he didn't call it, he could start, the dancers would do it. That's instinctive anticipation. The momentum and the flow of the dancers' bodies create an instinctive tendency or that anticipation to continue a given body action in the same direction. They want to do that. It's natural. You see this quite frequently as both instinctive and conditioned response to singing calls where Alaman left and weave the ring and the person just carries on singing and they don't say do, si, do, and swing, but the dancers are going to do it automatically. It's an instinctive thing that's been trained into them to the point where you don't even have to say it anymore. Swing through, girls fold. What usually comes next? Peel the top. That's both a conditioned, but it's also a natural flow unless you're going to change it, and you change it distinctively by getting your command out early. Swing through, girls circulate, boys trade. That's a conditioned response, but it's also an instinctive response because that's the natural flow. So I use a rolling stone. For conditioned, I use walkies. You say walkies to a dog, they're conditioned, they're trained. We're going out the door, that harness is on. Encouraged, here it comes. And if you think of it that way, you can use all of those to your advantage. The fourth one is execution. Okay, and that's not taking them out and killing the floor, but if you get this part wrong, that's exactly what you're going to do. Now, Execution includes the familiarity of the dancers with the material, but also the familiarity of the caller with the material, the ability to deliver that material and all the rest of it that goes into it. The material is being used will affect the smoothness and the rate of the execution. Precision of movement creates the sensation of smoothness from one person to the next, even in the same square. If the dancers have been taught to dance with the music and are familiar with the nature of the caller and their choreography, they're generally going to find the dancing smooth. The second is the adequacy of training. This depends on how well the dancers have been taught and how much use of the movement they've been given to match what is being called to them. Even if the calls are taught differently geographically, for instance, in Australia, they use the chicken wing Alaman left, which I absolutely hate and abhor, but that's the way it's done here. So that's a recognized regional difference, as opposed to the forearm turn, which says, forearm, I'm going around you and going back the way I came. I had never experienced that before. And if I had, because I hadn't been trained, I like to consider myself a smooth dancer, but I put my arm down here, she put her arm up there, and it created that hiccup, which threw our timing out. I was not adequately trained to anticipate that, to deal with that, to execute that, and it caused a little hiccup in the dancing. I use this example. If your dancers have been taught to do square through using 20 beats of music, because you as a caller rely on the speed of the dancers rather than the tempo of the music, their training is inadequate because they don't have the base fundamentals to dance to any other caller but you. You can teach them. It may take 20 beats of music to get them through it, to teach them, but you've got to get them dancing it in 10 or 12 as appropriate. So if their training is good, their dancing is, chances are it's going to be good. And that's also controlled by the caller. Space availability, that's for the caller to be aware of. And this deals with crowd factors, okay? If the dancers are squeezed tight, they can't dance smoothly. I mean, it would be great to have 50 squares today in a hall that only houses 30. We used to have that. We don't have that anymore. But this example also applies to callers setting the dancers up to do movements with sufficient space in which to perform that. So picture this, head square through. I'm in an 8 chain 4, okay? Now, flutter wheel, oh, it's tight. Or do the right and left through, ladies chain from that. It's tight. This is causing squeeze. I'm not giving enough movement. From the same thing from the 8 chain 4 or that corner box formation, call pass the ocean, spin the top. Now, if we're ever in the back in the position to have crowded floors, that's going to be real. Generally, you don't want to have a tidal wave or a two-face line on a crowded floor. But when you think about even that is tight for the dancers. Get them to set it up so they've got the movement. You don't want to do a long tidal wave or long two-face lines coming right out of the box. You've got to set it up properly. An example from a line, this is recently heard. This was a singing call figure. Heads lead to the right, pass through, trade by, circle to a line. There's my line. Pass through, bend the line. Not a problem with any of that so far. And then it was followed with slide through, reverse flutter wheel, ladies chain, pass through, swing the corner. Slide through put me in that nice little tight box. And I mean, it was a very tight box. Reverse flutter wheel after a slide through, nice flow if you end up from a box to a line, but from a line to a box is really tight. And then you followed it with a ladies chain, which is also tight, pass through, swing. It was just terribly uncomfortable to dance. Those are the 4 major key factors that a caller controls by doing it properly: your timing, your tempo, your anticipation, and your execution. With these 4 in place, understanding and the focus on choreography, number 5, becomes a much simpler prospect. The choreography and the choreographic mechanisms are the 5th consideration, and they all fall into factor number 5, or the 5th principal factor to smooth dancing, and that is kinesiology. Kinesiology refers to the study of a body movement and includes a consideration of the physical anatomy of the people, how their physical characteristics affect the way they move. Body movement to be successful and smooth needs to be comfortable so that the dancers remain balanced and they can manage their momentum. I don't say maintain, so they can manage their momentum, because there is stop action in square dancing, in any dancing. It's necessary to stop. It's necessary to change directions. Okay, that's part of dancing. But there's several choreographic aspects to consider. And what we are not talking about is things like raising your arms to dive through or do a star through. And oh, that's uncomfortable and it's bad choreography because the dancers are too old, or they're too short, or they're too tall. Things like the ability to adapt hand grips and release and reestablish hand contact, that's part of teaching. That's something that callers control. That's part of familiarity with the movement. That's got nothing to do with the choreography. It's how you perform it, okay? Not what the choreographic movement actually does. And teaching that so the dancers can do it comfortably and on time to adjust to their various physical differences, you're showing them how to do that already. And if you're not, you should probably start. The only adaptation to tempo and timing is when you're doing working with handy capables, that kind of stuff, where you may need to give that extra time. And by doing so, you modify your choreography accordingly. You modify the kinesiology to adapt to the dancers. For everybody else, it's already been done for you, so you shouldn't have to be worrying about it. Okay. Regarding kinesthetics, if you've been paying attention to the first four aspects, timing, tempo, anticipation, and execution, the kinesiology is then reduced to only focusing on three real aspects of dancing, and that will cover everything else. One, avoiding overflow. Body relations play into what is called counter dancing, or sometimes supportive dancing. Okay. Counter dancing is the need for dancers to turn around each other to counterbalance each other out. It's a necessary and fundamental part of dancing, and it doesn't matter if hand contact is there or not. Physical contact is usually better, but it doesn't always have to be there. What it is a mental and a physical relationship inherent in each movement that refers to the direction of body movements and the repetitive or contrasting turning that is part of how the call is done. So for instance, if I asked you to do a movement that says, I want you to call a movement or a series of movements that cause you to make a right hand turn 10 times in a row, most of you would mark that as overflow. In fact, most of you would say anything more than 4 turns or 360 degrees is overflow. But consider this, head square through. Everybody square through. Do a partner trade, square through 3, Alaman left. Very popular, used in all your square through drills. The overflow of those movements is built into the movement, and it's only interrupted by a step forward at the end. Okay, but it's all right hand turns. The reason it works is the singularity of that movement is counterbalanced by the participants of that movement. Everybody is going around each other, and they've got it. They've got the balance and the counterbalance of that flow, which way they're going, and that offsets the perception and the feeling of overflow. If, however, now that's 10 1/4 right hand turns in a row. In contrast, if I was to call heads touch a quarter, boys run, touch a quarter, boys run, Alaman left, I get to the same position, but that's 6 1/4 right turns. Yet due to the nature of the flow and the fact that they're not countering, when I do a boys run, I've got somebody sliding. It's an independent movement. Easy enough to do. That is, however, a short series sequence that doesn't have that counterflow built into the movement. It's now considered significant overflow. And this is the reason why direction changes are so important in choreography. This is why that relationship of counter dancing is so important to be aware of in the choreography you choose. The second one is body position. As a caller, you've got to choose material so that the dancers are positioned at the completion of one call, that the transition into the next can be accomplished without an abrupt change of direction. So consider, for instance, heads lead to the right, do a do-si-do. Very common, very smooth. It takes the dancers in a right-hand direction, moves the dancer to meet a new dancer with their right shoulder leading, and allows the dancer to step slightly to the left to easily and comfortably perform that do-si-do, right shoulder pass. Okay, and then you've got a sudden change of direction, slide to the right, as you move to the left, slide to the right, and then back up to the left. You've got not only changes direction, but abrupt changes direction of the do-si-do, which is infinitely comfortable because it's part of the movement. Consider the same aspect. Heads lead to the left, do a do-si-do. The dancers are moving as a couple or static, and lead to the left as a couple. Their left shoulder is leading in a left-hand direction, automatically taking him to the right-hand side of the dance, or to the right-hand side of the dancer. And you orient face to face, you're anticipating moving over to the right-hand side because your left hand is what's leading in. Now you've suddenly got to change that, change the direction. The next call being a do-si-do causes you to be out of position, rapidly reposition yourself. The body's in your mindset from left to right. You have to change that. You now have to think through the comfort of moving left to make the right shoulder available, contrary to the natural position and flow of the body. Simply put, you're out of position and it feels awkward and uncomfortable. That's what body positioning is all about. And you have to think about that as a caller. And the third one is hand availability. The hand that is to be used next must be available at the completion of the preceding call action for it to feel smooth. That does not mean right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. Okay. And as we'll see, there are exceptions. What it means is it must be the best hand available. As with body positioning, hand availability also refers to shoulder or flow availability, which should, unless inherently part of the movement, proceed from right to left to right. That's natural flow and rhythm of the dance. But as I was saying, exceptions such as right to right, for instance, touch a quarter, scoot back, are perfectly fine and they're perfectly comfortable because the movement mechanics of the body, or the kinesiology of the movement, calls for a deliberate release and a forward action, making the right to right the best hand available for smooth. If you did a touch a quarter, scoot back, and you followed it, release, step straight ahead, and wanted to do a left arm turn, suddenly you're creating a sudden change of movement, moving them over to the wrong side, twisting the body in a way that's unnatural in order to do that left hand turn. Okay, it's uncomfortable because the movement is not defined that way. That's why handability is the best hand available. Okay, the counter dancing of the rest of the movement is what makes that smooth, because you're working best hand available and you're working with someone else, and all of those things work together. So consider other actions that are terribly uncomfortable and why. For instance, touch a quarter, single hinge. Okay. If you look at it logically, it's just going, oh, okay, I'm doing a trade. Well, if you want to trade, call a trade. Don't do a movement that has a stop followed by another movement with the same hand. Touch a quarter followed by swing through, same principle. Walk around your corner, turn partner right. Or sorry, walk around your corner, turn partner right, turn corner right to a wrong way there. Right. Ooh, ooh. It's just not a natural flow. It doesn't feel right. Box the nat, Alaman left. Okay. Whenever you call that, you do a box the nat, you're there, you're face to face, but your right hand is joined. It's unnatural to call an Alaman left because your right hand is joined. But you hear change hands or clap hands, Alaman left. Now you've changed the parameters. It suddenly becomes so. Dixie style to an ocean wave followed by a left swing through. Terrible. Right hand, half left again. It's terrible unless you put something in there to make it. Okay. The list of kinesthetic errors is immeasurable. Okay. And we've all done it. We'll all do it again. We'll make these errors and we'll learn from them. But there are a number of ones like the ones I gave. Those are seen quite frequently and on quite a frequent basis, and in written choreography by some very good known masters, because it was, oh, everybody danced like that in the past. Well, bad choreography is bad choreography, whether it's old or it's new. You know, it doesn't matter if that's the way it was always done. If it was bad then, it's still bad now. Okay. So before we move on to talking specifics of choreography, because I know we will, and we'll all have examples of bad choreo, let's take a step back, look at the importance of what we're talking about when we say smooth dancing. Callers must strive to understand that smooth dancing requires very much more than just being aware of not using the same hand twice in a row. Smoothness directly involves the whole dance pattern, all three aspects of timing, the ability to use and create flowing anticipation, or breaking that anticipation with a bit of humor. It's part of that mental excitement. Square through three, there's you're building that mental excitement in the dancers. It includes the timing. It includes the sensation of smoothness that comes with the moving on beat with the music, the tempo. It includes the intellectual excitement and the ability to both deliver and execute dance patterns, not movements, dance patterns in line with the tempo of the music. It includes the comfort level and the ability of dancers to dance the program being called. It includes making sure that the space on the floor to perform the actions is taken into account before I call that movement. The kinesthetics of choreography is only one part of the movement, and it's so much more than just having a stop, having a change in direction, or using the same hand. Okay, so much more when you look at what is smooth. Only a small part of that is the actual physical choreography, movement mechanics of each individual movement. Okay, it's holistic. All five have to work together, and you as a caller, with the exception of a dancer's ability to dance, well, and you as a caller have that under your control most of the time because you're the one that taught them. Other than the phase of the moon, the waxiness of the floor, somebody had a bad day, you know, the toilet's blocked up and the hall smells. Those are the things you can't control. 90% of everything that we've talked about is under the caller's control. And it's not all about choreography. Now, you also have to take into account smooth dancing is not absolute, nor is it black and white. And just like any other form of dancing, there are always exceptions to the rules. There are going to be stops. There's going to be sudden direction changes. That's part of what dancing is. But you as a caller controls how they are judiciously and purposely used, and how the direction changes, the perceived overflow as opposed to real overflow, or even the stop and go is part of a movement. And you've got to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the other four aspects of smooth. The competent caller, knows when to break the rules, okay, but also when to, knows when he's broken a rule, but also knows when to break the rules for a causal effect. For example, when the total program goals require it. I'm calling to a hall with 17 squares and I've lost 3 squares, but I can easily pick up those 3 by calling calling bend the line. It may be awkward, but what I might do is facing out, I wanted to do something else. Go up to the middle and back. I'm facing out, bend the line. Okay, it might be just a little bit of a fudge and awkward, but I picked up 3 squares. Everybody's dancing again. I had a causal effect. Or I may do something, swing through, spin the top. Boys move up, spin the top. You know, that little pause or whatever it is that you're doing. I'm doing that for a causal effect to establish excitement. Most of square dance evening, most of the square dance tip, all of it, including those breaks, should be smooth flowing with comfortable dance patterns that move without hesitation, without long periods of standing, without uncomfortable abrupt direction changes that are not deliberately used as part of the movement. Okay, smooth dancing isn't about 1 or 2 movements. It's the holistic view. It means that it's an assessment of the total experience. And to achieve that, how do I put this? Yeah, it's the holistic experience. It's the total experience of all the interactive dance patterns created by those individual movements and how you put them together. In order to achieve the understanding of that, you got to get off the chair. You've got to get away from the computer. You've got to get away from the checkers. You use those to create and look at your routines and evaluate them, put them together or whatnot, if you're not doing it in your head. But you've got to get off the chair and feel the flow of it. And the only way to do that is by dancing it, either by yourself or with a couple, or practicing it beforehand. you've got to, well, simply put, computer programs today, they don't read body flow. Most of them don't. Colorama has got a little program algorithm in there that now tells you that might or might not be bad flow and why. Okay. But most of them don't read body flow or hand movements available from the movement that comes before that. All it sees is, I did this movement, it ends in this position. That's a stop action. What can I do next? Yes, I can do this legally by the terms of the computer program. It fits the rules of programming. It only sees that there are two couples facing each other or two dancers facing each other. And whatever that person that made the program says they can do from that position, that computer will do. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad flow. This is often what is meant by the expression, just because you can call something doesn't mean you should call something. All of that together holistically is what smooth dancing is about. So smooth choreography does not mean you cannot have sudden change of directions, nor does it mean you can never use the same hand twice. It doesn't mean you cannot turn in the same direction more than 360 degrees. You can, but you have to do it properly. Nor does it mean that the dancers have to be in motion for all 448 beats of a square dance tip, 7 phrases of music. They don't have to be in motion the whole time, nor should they be in motion the whole time. It does, however, mean that everything you do when you call, how you deliver it, how you present it, the direction changes and everything else is going to happen as much as possible, because when you as the caller made it happen, you did it intentionally, judiciously, and with a purpose. It's a dance. Let them dance. That includes all the changes, the stop and the go and everything else, and hopefully, done properly, the happy smiles and the enjoyment of that. The whole purpose of smooth is to enhance and increase the dancing experience, to create happy dancers that want to dance with you now and want to come back and dance with you again. Now, there are comfort and discomfort, and now we're going to talk specifically about choreography, like I said, but not in great detail. It's the difference between use and expectation, and this is a very, very old argument. From other formations, there are movements that should flow but do not flow, and it's mainly because they are not used frequently, or because the dance flow is not taught and turns are tightened rather than danced, or all sorts of little factors like this. And these are a little more subtle than meeting all those above. It could also be that we've always called this, so we're just going to keep on calling it. Doesn't matter if it's bad or not. Okay. One example, star through followed by zoom. We hear this all the time. While this fundamentally should flow, as it's a standard forward action, it only works if the star through ends with the dancers in a completed double pass through formation, which a zoom is not always called from, double pass through, zoom. Okay. If they star through and end in a double pass through formation, example, the center dancers are facing each other, zoom is a forward and away action. There's no room. The turn followed by a forward action bumping right into somebody makes it uncomfortable, which creates a tight congestion, which is awkward. That's what makes the movement awkward. So you should not use star through followed by zoom. From facing lines, here's another one. We had a little bit on this discussion earlier. Touch 1/4 zoom. Although this call has a directional flow and done properly, there's no interference or issues with space or hand availability. Because of its infrequent use, it's often considered awkward due to the anticipated response of being a directly forward motion or a fixed location turn, such as a circulate or a roll. Okay, although it's common in some places, especially to strong floors, dance groups, DBD dance groups, Europe does it an awful lot. It's in a lot of choreography. The argument on this is not, let's rephrase that. The argument on this is that logically and physically it should work, but simply put, it does not work. Okay, this is because the use and expectation make it uncomfortable. Both seasoned callers and, more importantly, the dancers agree that a circulate should be put in place prior to a zoom. What it does, it removes the anticipation factor. It sets that forward action in motion. It gets rid of that anticipation of a right turn or a forward action because you've already done it. Strangely enough, however, this is a combination that had no dance problems or complaints when you do touch 1/4, just the boys or just the girls zoom. So I said, well, why is that? I watched a bunch of videos on this where it's called, mainly in Europe. And what I've noted is that it works fine The dancers enjoyed it, but on reflection on it and the conversations I've had over the few years, the reason is touch a quarter followed by just the boys sets up that mental pause as well as the physical pause to allow that minute timing check. That offsets the anticipation and the phrasing and allows just the two active dancers, the girls or the boys, whoever it is on each side, to perform that movement. The others are stationary. That provides that counter dancing aspect and a visual reminder of placement. For that reason only, I would recommend that any caller, unless doing a specific DBD or dancing A2 and above, where that combination is used in concert with other movements, avoid it. Okay, anything below A2, avoid doing touch a quarter, zoom, even boys, even girls. The other one is star through followed by a square through, or star through, right and left through, or right and left through, square through. These are commonly used combinations. They've been used forever and a day, especially at basic and early on when learning to dance. Many callers say it's acceptable because the hand positioning at the end of the star through brings the hands down and releases, making it free. It's only the boy that has to adjust because the girl's using the left hand. The next movement is right hand. It is a right hand to right hand movement. And in fact, it is quite awkward. It's just been danced for so long that it's become considered acceptable. These are things that you as a caller have to make a judgment call. Just remember, if you call stuff like this too often and it's awkward, the dancers are going to be your judge, and they're going to judge your ability to make judgments. Last but not least, you'll note that I didn't talk about do a walk and dodge partner trade. Here's one of the oldest arguments on the book. Is this uncomfortable? The answer is no, it's not. It's not on most callers' do not call lists. It's not on, in fact, it's not on anybody's do not call lists unless they put it on the list themselves. Okay. A partner trade is only uncomfortable when the dodger goes right and then tries to make that inward pivot turn without allowing the completion of the walker's action. In other words, they do a walk and dodge, slide step back, and they're physically coming in. They have to make the adjustment. It's such an awkward thing that they're trying to over pivot and they're not finishing part of the movement. They're not taking the time. What happens there is it makes, that's called the squeezing action. It makes it so there's no room for either the body or the positioning to adjust, making it uncomfortable. All partner trades are going to be uncomfortable with this when this happens. Okay. When the walk and dodge has the right hand dancer dodging left, this movement is much more comfortable because of the right shoulder pass of the trade. Dodge left and you go forward and around. It's very comfortable because the leader is coming in and making a tight turn. So it's not the movement itself or the change of direction that's uncomfortable. And we see this all the time when we see, for instance, from facing dancers, boy walk, girl dodge, hinge, boy walk, girl dodge with the right hand trade, because that's the dodge and the trade. It's exactly the same action. So why is that comfortable and walk and dodge partner trade isn't? Well, there's two reasons. One is visibility. When you do a walk and dodge, generally, the dodger is facing out. They cannot see or establish that partner relationship nor establish it because that is part of what makes movements comfortable. When you can see what's happening, you can do it. It's like trying to do a backflip on a trampoline. Most people can do a front flip because they see where they're going and where they're landing. Yet a backflip is inherently easier. It's because that visual perception gives you the confidence and the ability of knowing what's coming next. So without that visibility, the partner relationship has to be established by touch. And a lot of the times we rush through the movement so quick, we don't dance on the beat, we don't make that touch. But if the dancer dodging stepped to the side, the walker reached up, touched hands, and then did the partner trade, that movement suddenly becomes smooth. The touch establishment, it allows for the relational smoothness to make counter dancing. And that's what makes it smooth. It allows you that support. The action of the side step forward trade by the dodgers is not uncomfortable at all. It's used everywhere. Do not, however, try and compare square dancing body flow to round dancing. I get this argument all the time. Well, side step pivot, very common. Waltzes, foxtrots, two steps, the tango. Round dancers have absolutely no problem with that. Okay, it's one of the most basic and common flow step patterns in almost every dance. The rhythm, however, of those dances is completely different. Don't ever compare it to square dancing because it's a bad argument and it's the wrong argument to make. Dance the movement properly with the proper hand contact and you'll suddenly have a good argument and be able to sell it. What makes this movement on and off the list, depending on the caller, is the dodger usually tries to sharp turn inward, creating that start direction change, usually blind without contact, rather than a cooperative stepping action, allowing the walker to have passage around the outside or the inside, depending on the direction of the initial dodge. That's all it is. Dance it properly, the problem disappears. Now, there's been a lot of lists made up, what to do, what not to do. In the notes that are going to be attached to this, I've attached Tim Mariner, or the late Tim Mariner's notes on body flow, seeing the patterns. I highly recommend that all new callers and even experienced callers have a look at your choreography and try and track the number one man through the entire sequence, then track the number one lady through the entire sequence and see what patterns develop. Because those patterns looked at holistically is what makes interest in the dance. If it's going like this in a little tiny part of the floor, chances are you're doing a lot of isolated stuff. But if it's got nice flow going all over the floor in different direction changes, chances are you're going to have smooth. The takeaway message from this is smooth dancing comes from good calling, good teaching, good delivery of practiced and understood choreographic movements. It's not about regurgitation of movements in the same sequence that you got them. You don't just chew up someone else's choreography and spit it on a plate. You've got to take the time to learn it, understand it, use it, and put all the other aspects of smooth into the presentation. Right. Are there any questions? Okay, so as always, before we start, let's go to Mark.
No,
were there any questions that came in the chat?
Questions? Nope.
All right, let's open the floor up.
The way things feel, that was about it.
What was that?
Swing through without a stop, explode the wave. We all say pop.
Ouch. Okay. Now, actually, that's a really good example. Whose comment was that?
Chris.
Chris, if you were going to use that, chances are you'd be using it at an A2 or a challenge floor. If you use that frequently, you've set up a conditional response, or you set up the response of anticipation of something, but they know something tricky is coming, so they're going to tune in and listen. Do you actually use that at all? You still with us, Chris?
He's here.
Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying something like that, but if in his own club, if that's used frequently, but picture going to an open dance at a national convention on a moderately capable mainstream floor where spin the top is used, swing through without a stop, spin the top, and you call in the plus hall, swing through without a stop, explode the wave, and watch the floor go, what? That's the difference between an anticipated and a conditioned response. It's like saying forward, up and back you float, pass through, wheel and deal. It causes the dancers to go, what? And you get that sudden jerky stop awkward action because they've got to process in their mind the difference between what their body wants to do, what they're ready to do, what they know to do, and what you're telling them to do. And that's part of the responses of execution that we were talking about earlier. Anybody else have any? Surely some people have got to have some comments on what is smooth. Put up some controversial ideas. Go ahead, Guido.
I have something. I could call a perfectly smooth dance if there were no dancers. And I have a reason for that. If you look at a dance floor, how dancers dance, I admit that there are some dancers who have been taught the definition wrong or the call wrong. But how many times do you see the center dancer of a two-faced line walk backwards on a Ferris wheel? it's what the dancers deliberately make a call that's perfectly smooth, they make it unsmooth for themselves. This is just one example. I have quite a few more, but I don't want to extend the list in a discussion.
Just to clarify that, Guido, I saw a few eyebrows. What do you mean walk backwards on a Ferris wheel? What happens is the dancers start to walk forward, but then they slide sideways and they sort of shuffle in sideways, causing, if the ladies on the right-hand side, the ladies to back into the final position on the Ferris wheel, rather than as a couple walking straight forward and finishing it like a wheel and deal. That's a nuance of dancer adaptation. It's like that heads lead to the right and then join four hands, start circling halfway, do a side set, shuffle, crowd in, peel yourself in underneath, wheel around backwards, and then do a double veer left while the outside slide over, which is how we do a circle to a line if you wanted to explain it. Yeah. You know, that shuffle and slide to a line. Those kinds of things, that kind of a circle to a line is terribly uncomfortable. I don't know where it ever came from, but it's something that dancers have adapted. This is one of the aspects of choreography, as I was saying. The dancer familiarity with the material and their ability to dance is something that we as callers control by teaching the dancers to dance properly and fundamentally, but also to adjust. But it is also something that we as callers do not control. You cannot control how the dancers are going to react to you, if they're going to do a spin, if they're going to do a hidey-ho instead of a do-side-do. Those are things you can't control. But what you can control is how you present your material in such a way that if they're going to adapt their dancing, they still have to dance without making it uncomfortable for other dancers. And believe me, the mob mentality of dancers will very quickly correct them if they do it too much in a square.
Yeah, but I usually tell them, I teach you the call correctly. I teach you how to dance it smoothly, but it's your choice to make it uncomfortable for yourself. Because I cannot control how dancers will will perform the call. I just can show them how to do it smoothly.
I was at a dance here, and it's not just the dancer's reaction. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into this. The clarity of presentation is a really, really good example. I was at a dance a couple of years ago, and there was a lady who was visiting from Japan, and she was up and she did a guest tip. The singing call was absolutely perfect because they knew what to listen to. It was a common routine. It was, you know, the language barrier was a bit, but the patter call, a lot of dancers were very jerky, very uncomfortable, very, very awkward in the performance of the movement. And yet other squares found it beautiful, smooth, and flowing. That was the difference in a language barrier and presentation. And there was a few of I heard this and I was very upset with it. And I actually went over to the person afterwards, says, oh, if they're going to call, they should learn to speak English. It was, in my opinion, a very rude and a very arrogant call, or a very arrogant comment to make, because I could understand the movements. The movements were clear. Just the presentation of the whole thing with the accent and the filler that caller was using as filler words for her own internal timing made it difficult. And that was a biased perception. And I see this with Czech callers. I see this with foreign callers. It's a biased perception that you don't want to listen just because you don't understand the accent. You get the same thing. I had the same thing going to the States because I have a Canadian non-accent, going to Texas and going head square through instead of y'all square through now, or however it is they say it down there. It's the same perception. We shut off and we say that caller is not smooth. It's not the caller. That's a dancer. You cannot control that bias. Guido, you had a comment.
A couple of years ago at the IPAC, a Japanese caller had an interpreter on the floor to repeat the calls in a more, let's say, understandable way than he was able to call them in a C3B hall.
That would be interesting.
It was interesting. It was kind of funny to have the Japanese caller calling. Well, he was understandable for a good part. Having a Japanese ladies translating it to several squares, what he just said in English.
We have a dancer here in Australia who shall go unnamed, but I'm pretty sure a few of the Australian callers and dancers will know exactly who I'm talking about. They like to translate English to English. And every time if the caller is up there and says head square through, that person will lean down and go, head square through. Right and left through, right and left through. They'll repeat the call inside. I see a couple of chuckles. You probably know who I'm talking about, but they feel it's necessary to say it for clarity for everybody in the square. Doesn't matter who's calling or how clear it is. It's something that they developed to have. Those are factors that you as a caller cannot control. You can only control what you can, and that's the only thing you should worry about. It's think about calling as the fear of flying. Okay, it's a daunting experience to be afraid of flying and get on an airplane. Well, it's the same with calling. It's daunting to be a caller, but like flying, once you're on the plane, there's two options. You get there or you don't, and you have absolutely no control over either option. So you may as well enjoy the flight and enjoy yourself. Calling's the same way. You're behind the mic. You may as well do it properly, enjoy the flight, and get to where you're going.
This translating of calls I've experienced in Switzerland, where a dancer in a square translated to the dancers of Geneva into, they were speaking French, translated the calls in a French diction to the dancers because they couldn't understand. In that case, it was Joe Chroma's English. So
I can understand that. My favorite stereotypical American in Quebec, where they speak French, and this comes up a lot, and it was one of the things that's always a chuckle, but I've seen it everywhere. They figure if you put an accent on, it's more clear. There's more clarity. And it was an American, and he had a very, very pronounced, shall we say, from the southern regions of the States way of talking. And he was trying to order a hamburger in Quebec City. And it went, yeah, can I have a hamburger, ma'am? Pretty straightforward. Everybody can understand that. The person serving could not understand that. Can I have a hamburger, ma'am? And put on this horrendous French accent, still speaking English, as if that would make it much more clear. And you see this happen all the time. Putting an accent doesn't help clarity.
And even speaking louder doesn't help.
No. Yes. It's like men with remote controls. If the battery is dead, pushing the button harder is not going to change that fact. But we'll sit there for 20 minutes pushing the button harder to make that TV channel. Bob, you're smiling. You can relate to that one, can you? Oh, yeah. I'm not going to change the battery. You're going to push the button harder. Daryl, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just a brief comment or two. Nice presentation. All good stuff. You didn't say much about delivery as far as the music goes.
No, I didn't.
And that's a very important part of getting the floor to dance smoothly.
Absolutely.
For years, I always knew when I was doing it right. I could look out across the floor, and if it was all doing this, I knew everything was going well. Everything was flowing. The music, I was using the rhythm as part of the delivery. As far as the chord structure and phrasing, that's important too. But that rhythm, you want smooth dancing. You want to look out there and see that floor doing this. Do this. You know that something went wrong. It might have probably not you, but that's nice in classes where you're teaching. All of a sudden you see something like this, your eye goes to it immediately. Had so many dancers say, "You see everything." You don't really see everything, but you notice that when it happens.
And you see what you see is when there's a difference in that rhythmic flow. You're absolutely correct, Daryl. I didn't mention, I only mentioned being able to deliver with the music, giving them the first beat and getting them to move and move in time with the music. That's all part of the delivery things. The reason I didn't spend a lot of time on it is because we've had 3 sessions on that topic just by itself. And it is every one of these topics that I talked about, all 5 of those factors, they're 3 or 4 or even 5 sessions to understand them fully in itself. This is just an overview of the factors that you need to consider when you talk smooth dancing. Don't just think about it as choreography. There's so much more that goes in. And it's
Okay,
like preparing a meal.
like
you
I
know.
said, it was brief.
Yeah.
Just consider it a short reminder.
Yep. I thought I did, but you're absolutely correct. It is probably getting him to move and getting that rhythm established. And I said it a few times in there. Once you do that and you get them moving to the beat and you can deliver and perform, your command time, your delivery time, and their execution time is all working with the music, 90%, and I kid you not, 90% of the problems of dancing will disappear, because if they're moving on the beat with the tempo of the music, you cannot help but succeed, because the rhythm is there, the flow is there, the idea and the perception of dancing and smoothness becomes automatic because they have to do something. They know they have to do something. I got 10 beats. I know I've got something else coming up to do at the end of it. And it's a most wonderful feeling, not just this, but if you're above a floor, watching that kaleidoscope of movement just going like this the whole time, nice and smooth. And where Daryl said, oh, you see everything. When you see this and suddenly, oh, look, I've got a finger raised, that stands out like a sore thumb, no pun intended. You can see where somebody's having a problem because everything else is moving smooth. We've lost that aspect. Not all of us, but some of us have lost that, and a lot of our dancers have today. Excellent comment, Daryl. Thank you. Any other comments, discussions? Anybody have any experiences they want to share?
Yeah, I guess I could. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Joe.
Okay, good. I just finished doing a college workshop for the Alberta Convention here in Canada. And I think 75% of the callers read their material. And I think our technology is doing us in a little bit, because people are using Taminations or Colorama to write their material, and then they read it. What to me is blatantly poor calling is when they put the paper in front of them and they call and they still don't see the dancers. They haven't dancer proofed their material. They've just written it because, like you say, Mel, the computer allows them to do head square through 4 hands and 2 ladies chain. To me, that's a horrendous misuse of our skills. And yet they got on the floor through the convention. They called these things, and some of them, dancers thought they were heroes. They said, boy, that person really likes to call. Well, it's too bad they don't like to call well. As far as accents go, I think relating one quick story about calling in Germany back in the 90s, when the wall had come down, I was the first caller to call in this one particular city. Started with an M, by the way. Maybe somebody knows. Famous for chocolates, I think. Anyhow, their first language was Russian, and then German, and then English. And of course, they learned square dancing in English. And so we had class people there as well as their experienced dancers. The dance went really well, no problem, because I don't have an accent, of course, other than being from Rochester, New York. So I do murder some of the language. But they danced well. They had a fine time. It was during the breaks that was tough, because I don't speak Russian, German, passable English. So the accent, I don't know, they learned well. Anybody that I've called for in Japan, they again, no problem. If they had a problem with the call, they would huddle and talk in their language to clarify. Then they would break back out into their squares and never make a mistake on that call again. So, we get used to these people
I
from
think you'll find that
Massachusetts.
that's not just Japan. That happens quite frequently all over the place. I had the pleasure of calling in Switzerland once, and as well as in France, and exactly the same thing happened. And I spent 3 years in Germany. Exactly the same thing. My biggest issue was not with the calling, it was with the breaks. And then with me being arrogant enough to think that I could translate English into German by translating words instead of sentiments or the meaning to be established, which comes to things like honoring your partner changes into things like taking her skirt down when you translate it word for word. It just doesn't translate right. Thankfully, some of the Germans in our club had a very good sense of humor, but it didn't go over all that well, and I never did it again. Yes, Ross.
I think experienced dancers tend to tune in. They learn how to tune in very quickly to different callers. And probably some dancers that have trouble are dancers that only dance to one caller. And then when they go somewhere and dance to all different ones, they have trouble tuning in. I mean, we're lucky we have 4 different callers. So our lot
Absolutely.
learn to tune in. But
Absolutely.
I mean, they still struggle.
When I was calling in Ottawa, and I started a couple of new clubs there, and then I was also fortunate enough to be hired by 3 other clubs in the area to be their club caller. There were a lot of dancers coming in at the time, a lot of students, but of course they couldn't dance on the night that I was calling in this club. I would recommend either my club in another town or other callers. And then a lot of them were surprised that, they really liked it. One of my favorite callers in that area was Paul Adams, and he ran a club. His club, it took a full year to learn the basic program. It took another full year to learn, for the same group, to learn the mainstream program, and he alternated the nights. And then there was a club that he would dance me. And this was his program every year. And he always had, 5, 6, 7 squares of new dancers because he took his time. He was an entertainer, not a great singer. He was good, but he was a fabulous entertainer, and he knew how to please a floor. And for those of you that had the pleasure of meeting Paul Adams, you'll know exactly what I was talking about. But it came up at a callers meeting one time, says, I've got all your dancers joining my club. Are you okay? Is there something wrong? And I said, no, absolutely not. I encourage them to go to dance to any other club if they've got the night free, to dance with as many callers as they can to experience it. And yes, I know I may be doing mainstream and you're only doing basic, or vice versa, but I encourage them to go and dance to he said, oh, I thought they wanted to join. I thought you were having trouble with your club, because I wanted to, and he did me the courtesy of coming on the side and saying, I've got 3 squares of your dancers coming to dance with me every Wednesday. He thought maybe something was wrong. They weren't happy with it. I said, no. And it was an oddity, because at that time, and I didn't realize at that time, there was some of the clubs that were totally discouraging their dancers from going to visit other clubs and dance with other clubs because they were afraid of losing their dancers. And what I found is it actually had the opposite effect. It was like, has anybody ever seen the movie Miracle on 34th Street, the old Christmas movie? Okay, where Santa Claus says, well, you know what, we charge $5 for this, but if you go down to Myers across the, down the road, you can get this for $3. And they were coming back, mad at him, but he said, well, hey, you saved me money on this, but they're so honest here. I'm going to do all my shopping here because they'll tell me where I can get a better deal. It created that template. Well, it's the same with your dancers. If you're, I think it was it you, Bob? Yeah, earlier in a conversation. If you're honest with your dancers and you explain why, your dancers are going to appreciate you and respect you more because you're doing it for them. That context was about doing something from a left hand or a left-hand flow because it's actually more comfortable and everything else, dealing with the touch of quarter zoom, the circulates and peel offs and everything else. But explaining why suddenly took the pressure off the dancers of learning, oh, we're doing this a different way. Well, this is why we're doing it this way, because it works. And once they understood the why or your reasoning behind it, they respected you a lot more. They had a lot more confidence and faith with you because you knew your own limitations, but you also encouraged them. today, Roz, you're in an anomalous position because you've got so many other callers that are actually calling regularly that your dancers can go to. But in a lot of areas, there aren't callers. Mark was mentioning earlier, it's 30-mile drive for him to go to another club. He's the only one within 30 miles. That's a long distance for a lot of dancers these days. So it's anomalous. Joe, did you have your hand up, or were you just waving by?
Actually, I was waving goodbye to Daryl.
Oh, okay. Mickey, I saw your hand. Was it the same?
Yeah, I was waving too, but still, I would like to express a little bit of sadness and disappointment in this session here. Especially, you know, from taking a look at you and the Australian people, I don't see any British here, that there is no flag and no sign from the Queen or your new king there. It's just like normal, and so I expected a little bit of patriotism on this day, but no, I'm just kidding. All fine.
Yeah. No, I actually understand that. It is a loss. No, but nobody's going to argue the loss of Elizabeth is going to have a lot of repercussions. But I actually had the pleasure of meeting, and it was. I don't think that she was one of those people that says everybody stop what they're doing and say, "Oh, poor me." Take a day and remember me. Remember everybody in their own. I prefer to celebrate how people lived, not the fact that they're dead.
Oh yeah, she's gonna still inspire people and being on there. And
if
encourage, right?
If you want a classic example of it, the King's coronation and the King's speech, King Charles III was on, we've got, I think, 48 channels on television here. He was on two of the channels. The Death of the Queen and the Life of the Queen concurrently was running for the last 3 days on 15 of those channels, and only one was about the new king.
Okay.
That tells you something about interest and whatnot.
Well, you've had him twice, right? Been in Canada and Australia now.
Well, all depends on what you do. But when you think about it, you could also say you did as well, because the family, if you look at the family origins in the history,
yeah,
what was the Second World War? They're all the same family.
I tell you what I also figured out, it was funny that Lady Di and Camilla, they come from the same family.
Yeah.
And they all come from Charles II. He was kind of, he was very flashy. What do you say? He was very busy.
Prolific.
Because he had 350 whatever set in the world. And both of them can go back to Charles of the Second. And yeah.
Well, I suppose if you want to get fundamental, we could all go back to Adam and Eve, depending on your perspective of the world. So,
yeah,
you know, I usually don't go down that road, but my only comment is like, what has 26 legs and 7 teeth? Isn't that the front row of a Lee Kernaghan concert in Schwäbisch Gmünd? You can apply that to anywhere in the world.
right.
Here in Australia, it's the front row of a Lee Kernaghan concert in Tumbarumba, but it applies everywhere. Yeah, the big aspect of today was to give an overview because of a number of comments that were becoming embedded in discussion, that smoothness, what is smoothness? And it was all about choreography. And it was all about individual movements. You know, square through followed by left swing through is not smooth. And that's where the focus was. And then we got into touch a quarter followed by walk and dodge. Not a problem, but partner trade after that is not smooth. That's not true. And why it's not true. Or touch a quarter zoom is kinesthetically, logically, and physiologically should be smooth. It's not, because of the mental anticipation, all those other factors. And it dawned on me that although we've touched, as Daryl was saying, we've touched on delivery, we've touched on anticipation, we've had sessions on flow, we've had an entire session on the difference between timing and tempo, and understanding that difference. And people didn't understand that, or speed and tempo, why they are not the same thing. But we never actually stepped back and said, here's the whole thing as a prepared meal as opposed to choreographic regurgitation. So I thought it was time to put a perspective. Ideally, this session should have been before all of those sessions and then looking at them one at a time, but it's a good overview. And it's something that's not put into perspective too much. It's something that says, good smoothness means you've got good delivery, good timing, the dancing on the beat, and your choreography, you've got a right hand to a left hand to a right hand to a left hand, and you don't change direction side. Okay, now let's move on. I want you to deliver smooth choreography. Well, there's your whole presentation for a 1-week collar school on smooth dancing. It says nothing, it gives you nothing. And this is why I do these sessions, to look at each individual bit in pieces. Yes, Joe?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm glad you did this presentation. There is so much to learn, especially for the newer caller. And by newer caller, you know, we're not talking about someone who's just had a year or two. It could be like, who is it? There's Stephen there. You say you've got 40 years, but you're a new caller. Or you have 1 year of experience. You know, if you call for one club once a month, you're relatively inexperienced, even if you've done it for 40 years. But the idea of, so many times we get these stereotypes of, yes, you know, touch the quarter, walk and dodge, and then a partner trade is bad. You know, it's called dancing, and we need to inspire the dancers to move to the music. If the heads are scoring through, the sides should be tapping their feet. They should be dancing. They should be moving, if they're capable. It's kind of like a football player or a tennis player. You ever watch them? Their feet are going like this because they can go this way, that way, forward, back. They can go any which way. And as a dancer, you know, we need to kind of be ready to do that. And the other thing along with music, and of course I'm sure it's been covered, is the instrumentation that is in a piece of music. And Bob probably can tell you a lot about that too. You know, you take something like the Old King of the Road that has the change of instrumentation. The beat remains the same no matter what. The tempo is there, but from the opening the opener, which is laid back, you know, nice and slow and relaxed, and then all of a sudden they changed the instrumentation, or the rhythmic instrumentation, and it feels like it's speeded up, and the dancers will run to do that. It's fun to watch and to do, and the dancers do like that kind of a thing. But you know, we have to point out that the beat is still the beat. It's still the same
The tempo
melodic
stays.
tempo all the way through that. So
You're absolutely correct, Joe. A lot of caller, like with practice, a good caller will use the own perception. Your voice becomes part of that instrumental. And your voice is the instrument by which you can build, you can inflect, but you can also generate that perception of speed. It's the difference between, here's exactly the same. Square through, right and left through, pass through, trade by, right and left through, dive through, pass through, square through, bend the line, square through 3. Now, if I did that, this is the same thing. Square through in the middle of the hall, and I get 4 hands, and I go down now, and then they do the right and left through and pass through, trade by, swing through, and a boy, or run around a girl, and a couple circulate, get up there, boys, and a right and left, and so on. I couldn't do a right and left through from there, but you get the idea. The tempo is staying the same. And this is why I thought it was important that I said the difference between 120 beats per minute and 130 beats per minute is 0.02 2/100ths of a second difference between beats. 8 seconds over the course of a record, or 1.28 seconds over the course of one singing call figure. That's it. There's 1 second difference between doing it at 120 and 130 in each one of those phrases of a singing call. And that's calculated out. That's mathematically provable on the scaling, looking at the timing. If you want to go through the formulas, I spent a lot of time doing that the other night, and I wish I had the paperwork, but we looked at that. I timed it. I measured it. Yes. And that is accurate. But the perception is very, very different. On a full record of 7 figures, 448 minutes, 448 beats, it's just over 8 seconds difference. That's it. And there's only 7 phrases, just over a second per phrase, per figure. That's not a lot of time. If you really want to feel the difference, have a look at, I believe it's Fisherman's Luck, which is a 2/4, really, really, really fast. And then listen to Hallelujah on Ego, 4/4, really, really, really slow. Hallelujah's got a faster tempo. Go figure. It's actually danced faster, but it feels slower because, you know, it's an old Leonard Cohen song. The instrumentation of the music and the instrumentation of your voice is what gives that excitement, that experience to the dancer. Bob mentioned something earlier, which I said I disagree with him, but I also agree with him at the same time. He used to entertain the dancers with his choreography. But it wasn't just the choreography. Bob didn't get up there and go square through, right and left through. It was the presentation, it was the rhythm, it was the making that choreography into a lyrical dissertation that feels like a song, which feels like a rhythm, which feels like a chant that makes it entertaining and fun to dance to. That delivery, all that stuff is what goes into the background that supports the choreography. If I said, Bob, I've given you square through, right and left through, dive through, Alaman left, go. They could each present 4 or 5 different routines using those 3 movements only. And each one would feel different, even though it's exactly the same choreography. How they present it, what they do with it, how they want to put it together, all those other kinds of things. That's what being a caller is about. It's not just say, Bob, write me some choreography so I can read it off the paper to the dancers. And that's unfortunately what a lot of us do. We don't take that time. Yes, Mickey.
Yeah, another thing is what I think we have to get the dancing back into square dancing.
Yes.
And the funny thing is that I don't know how to say it or to put it together, but taking a look on dances, on the singing calls, you usually have a smooth dancing. If the choreo is then too awkward or too tough for the floor, then you have no stop and go, and it's just, you know, there's enthusiasm and they move on the beat and everything is just going from one call to the other and they're all moving smooth. Now, it seems that within the last decades, we've lost that in the hoedown on the presentation because we're playing too much chess and breaking that flow and making it, especially in the entry level, too complicated and trying to solve a puzzle and whatever. And we're lost that, okay, because of lack of preparation or lack of knowledge or whatever, or both of them. And I think that's where we have to put emphasis again on having a smooth choreo, which also works in the hoedown. And maybe that's one thing that, especially in the high levels, hardly anybody goes with singing calls.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree and disagree on 2 aspects of that. And I think it's probably just a way of presenting the term. You're saying smooth choreo in the hoedown as opposed to smooth choreo in the singing call. A lot of that is not the choreography in the patter call or in the hoedown. It's the way that patter is being presented. And you remember what I said about regurgitation? In most cases, a singing call, Like what's your favorite singing call, Mickey?
Oh, I've got
Just name one.
200-300.
Just name one that you like. If I wanted you to deliver a singing call a cappella right now, just pick one that you could do.
I hope I could do them all, but
Just name a song.
acapella. One of my singing calls I've been doing from the beginning, and usually I have the tempo on 128, so it gives 30 seconds for one phrase, and whenever I have to wait for 2 minutes, I
What's
do
the
the
song?
song. Yeah, that's the excitement.
What's the name of the song, Mickey?
The name is gonna come at last. No, usually that is Riding My Thumb to Mexico.
Okay, beautiful song. Okay, now here's a figure. Heads square through 4, do side do, swing through, boys run, tag the line, cloverleaf, girls square through 3, swing your corner. Go.
I probably wouldn't call that because it's too tight timed, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
But what I'm saying is you'd probably drop the do side do out of that. Just
No,
allow it, because just hear me out. If you know, you'd probably drop the do side do out of that initially, see where the dancers go. You'd be able to perform that with relative confidence because you know that song, you know the phrasing of the song, you know the music of the song, you know the beats and the lyrical phrasing, and you're comfortable with that piece of choreography because you've used it in other things. All of the work has been done for you. So it would take relatively little practice, or even cold, you could probably present that on a floor. It may not be your best performance, but you could do it with a good job. That's because the work has been done for you and you're regurgitating choreography. If I said to you, I want you to use cloverleaf and tag the line in your patter, you're not regurgitating choreography, and you've got to work. It's not so much the choreography. You could present that same piece of choreography in patter, but it would be a little more uncomfortable because the work and the phrasing and the delivery has not already been done for you. And that's where this is, when you said choreography, that's what I think where the difference was. That's why I was disagreeing when you said make your choreography more interesting in the patter. It's the way it's delivered.
yeah, but I think our ability
I'll be with you in a second, Bob.
Our ability should be that if we get a task like this, just go up there and you say cloverleaf, put that in your hoedown. We should go ahead and do it like that with no stop and go. This is what we have to aim to, at least, right?
And that's because we have lost the ability. We focus too much on the choreography and the wow of the choreography instead of the smoothness, the delivery, and the flow of the choreography, the same as we do. We spend so much time practicing a singing call. How much time do we actually spend practicing a hoedown, regardless if we're sight calling? We've lost that emphasis because our focus is on sight calling, on interesting choreography, as opposed to on the entertainment of the dancers. And I think we're saying the same thing, but probably just approaching it from a different angle.
And just to add one thing with attack the line, I'd rather go with the leader's turn back or face right twice and swing and promenade.
Yeah, however, you know, I was just an example. I could have used any figure. Bob, you had your hand up. You're muted.
You alluded earlier today about how much improved Yolanda has been, and that was because I taught her not to talk the figures of the singing calls, which has become prevalent today. If you could record somebody on 2 tracks, music on 1 track, and they're calling on the other, I would venture to say over 90% of the people who call today, you do a singing call and it's just what you were doing earlier. Head square through, swing through, boys run. And what I worked with Yolanda was to use the chord progressions that are in the singing call. Well, the head square through and go forehand, you know, swing through, doing phrasing, musical phrasing using the choreography, and that creates it anchors the dancing to the music, which we don't have much more. I Up in Oakdale, we were in there, and the round dancers get up there and they do these round dances, and the people are breaking down and they can't do the choreography. And I turned to the round dance cuer and said, "Where's the beat? You can't hear the beat. It's the beat that moves the feet." And a lot of callers today also, they take their stuff and they put on their singing call and they turn down the bass, which that's the part of the music that moves the soul and the feet.
Unintended.
And you need that, and you need people to attach to that. Then they can do your choreography if you've developed phrasing that fits the timing of it. Now, I would have
Exactly.
no trouble with, if I wanted to use riding my thumb to Mexico, head square through and go, forehand, swing through and the boy run, tag the line and go, clover leaf, girl to the middle and square through three. I would never ever call swing the corner promenade. I would call star through and promenade. And or if I wanted the floor to have an orgasm, I would work on teaching left box and that, because Jerry Story and Tony Oxidine for 2 years went around, and part of their presentations included doing left box and that and a roll. And not that they did stuff that you demonstrated earlier that made me puke. It just didn't flow. But they had their little thing, and it did this a whole lot of unused stuff. And then I just researched it, and then I got this. Oh, this would be so cool! And I do the whole workshop, let box and roll during the patter, and I say, "Wasn't that cool?" And everybody goes, "Huh?" Then I do the singing call, and I do that little thing, and I did girls square through three, do a left box and roll, then promenade, and you hear a gasp come from the floor. And I've had that happen more than once. And it was, why? The left box and roll is a perfect twirl. It's dancing. You say there's no dancing other than swing. That's not true. And you put in that left box and roll and promenade, and they go, "Whoa, this is cool." And you got them dancing again. I've done all kinds of things that are contrary to everybody else. When I started 50 years ago out in Concord, they did their square dance classes. And after 9 months of classes, they'd have a graduation, and the ladies would buy their dresses for the graduation, and they would start with get their square dance outfits. They couldn't understand why 20 years out in Concord, when I was doing the classes, after 6 weeks of classes, every lady in the class had a square dance dress, was wearing it. And I never asked them to buy a square dance dress, not once. But after 5 weeks, they had a square dance dress. Have you any clue why that happened? It's because I started teaching them what they were going to use the dress for when they got one. Do you know how many women if you tell them, when you get a dress, you will do this. Do you know how long it takes them to get a dress? The slow ones take 5 weeks. The third and fourth week, a good majority of the class had them. And today, I miss seeing that. You know, when I look at square dances today, I look at zombie training. They dress down, and it just doesn't look like a dance. If you went to a ballroom dance, would you dress the way that people dress for a square dance today? No way in hell. You know, if I took my wife to a ballroom dance, she would want to wear a ballroom dress.
Yeah.
But
The
not in
difference, the
square
difference in that
dancing
one
because
though is when you're learning to ballroom dance, generally you're in lycra, spandex, short things, you've got your dancing shoes on. But when you go out to a dance to perform, you get dressed up. And square dancing
okay,
needs to incorporate that. You know, you can dance comfortably at your club and lessons all you want, but when you go to a dance, you get dressed. You can play darts in shorts and
yeah,
a
but
shirt, but when you
because
go to a function, you get dressed up.
because they don't wear dresses at classes, they have no idea how to add all the flourishes and stuff to go with wearing that dress.
Bob, Bob,
But it's just me.
you were talking about zombies or whatever. Is it like dancing then, like The Walking Dead? And then I
Yes,
understand the dying activity.
you're absolutely right. By the way, I didn't come up with the zombie dancing. This happened to me about 20 years ago. I was teaching children, third and fourth graders, how to square dance at a public school. And the internet was around at that point, and they were publishing videos on YouTube on square dancing. And some kids watched it and came up the club and or at the class and said, "Bob, it's square dancing is fun, but I didn't know the zombies square dance too." Their interpretation of it was higher level dancing, of watching the people dance was watching zombies.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, that's why it's called sea level dancing. It doesn't mean challenge, it's coffin.
There you go.
They get out of their coffins and dance.
But you know, if you watch,
Come on, Chris, I'm giving you all sorts of openings to join back in here.
oh, Chris is asleep. But MIT, if you watch,
No, I heard that.
if you watch the dancers dance on the MIT videos, they do dress.
But they don't dance.
Chris?
So dressing
Some of
right
them- some of
means
them
you
dance
can
very well.
dance. So all you have to do is wear a fancy dress and you can dance then, huh?
No,
Apparently
if you-
so.
not if
Now,
you
Joe,
don't know
you're
how
just
to
using
use
that
it.
wooden spoon to stir the pot.
Not if you don't know how to use it.
Does this include the men?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
all us guys are talking about dresses, huh?
I'm very
Which
strict on
shirts?
my classes. If I call weave the ring, the men have both hands behind their back at pocket level. And the hand that's not being used is placed in that. But that's how I was taught, because I saw that taught by Bill Kastner, a legend of the activity. He had the Square Daters exhibition group. For anybody that lived through that or saw his team dance, they were the most beautiful dancers you ever seen. So I wanted my club dancers to be as close to that as possible.
Yeah. For me, I've got mixed feelings on that. I love to teach the styling, and I'm a very, very strong proponent of styling. I try not to teach the additional flurls and whirls and twirls and whirls and, clap, hand, slam, tip, box, and that, reverse, back, spinner around on a right and left grand that you see, because that throws timing out. Those are individual club things if they want to learn it. But I have no problem showing them that this is what they're going to be experienced. There are some things such as, if you're wearing a skirt, you can do this or you can do that. If you're not, it's entirely a choice. I give them the choice. I agree with you, Bob, on skirt work. One of the things I do miss on skirt work, and one of the reasons why there was a lot of skirt work and florals and whirls and a lot of counter dancing, was actually not designed for the styling. It was actually designed for air conditioning and flow because it wasn't there. And you'll notice no, I'm actually quite serious on this. If you look at that, if you look at the old cotillions that were going in, they would be in a crowded hall, which is usually done in the summertime, or the doors would be closed in the wintertime when they have that. This is the crinolines created a lot of counterflow in the dancing, which created air circulation. And you can feel that on the Weave the Ring. You get that air circulation going. Men don't have that option. And that's why it was incorporated into the styling and the fact that it looked good. And it was designed when they took the normal flow of just having a fan walking around, they took that flow to create the air currents and so to add into the styling. Those are incorporations of dancing that came from about the 1700s forward to what we got into the flow of dancing. Styling is a very, very important aspect of teaching to dance. But having fun on the floor and dancing properly in time with the music and executing the calls properly with the right amount of time, that's a dancer's job. Our job is to make sure that they can do that and that they're taught properly to do that so that they can go out and enjoy it. So that if I go to Bob's dance and I'm dancing as a lady and I don't have a skirt, I can still effectively dance the movements without interfering. I may not be able to flourish the non-skirt that I'm wearing, but I'll be able to dance to Bob effectively because I can dance and I can adapt my styling to meet his dancer requirements. Mickey, you had your hand up. Joe, stop trying to picture me in a skirt.
You're muted, Mickey.
Thank you, Bob. Similar to what Bob said, when we start a class, then we do not promote the petticoat and stuff like that because we don't want to talk to people into a lot of expenses. Okay, but what we usually do up to the student party, which is dive through, which is in January when we start. Usually the ladies from the club, they hand over some of their clothing to the others, and we put a little styling in there, and they wear that for the student party. And the next time we have a big dance is the student jamboree. Is usually then everybody gets its own clothing, but then they have made the decision already that after the class they want to continue with the activity. Latest at the graduation, everybody gets their own clothing and everybody's dressed up fine. And the funny thing is they get so used to the dancing with the skirt work and everything that sometimes when we're on tour and on other occasions and there's spontaneously we dance without the traditional clothing, they say it's really tough because we don't know where to put our hands. So
Yes.
yeah, and they say, even though at the beginning they said, oh, I'm never going to wear that skirt and that dress, I'm never going to run around like that. Once they've got it, they do not want to miss it with dancing. And just one more point to Chris. I've sent you a text message in the chat. Just check it. Okay.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing on when we talk about skirt work and twirls and fanciness, and this is part of it, and this is how it was taught. Yes, it is. But I also want to point out that the skirt work of a knee length or just slightly longer skirt, grabbing and flaring it out, only came into the fore after the late 40s, early 50s, because prior to that, ladies would dance in pants or ladies would dance in a prairie skirt. Generally, the prairie skirt was the longest, and the flare of the skirt was just a little fold out because there was only a very soft crinoline underneath most prairie skirts. Prior to that, it was the bell hoop skirt, which was the whole thing with the bustle and everything else. And as it goes back, as you look through all of these, you'll see the differences. The principle behind the flow and the skirt work and everything else, however, has remained the same. It has adapted to meet the clothing standards and the clothing changes. We have not, and I'm really, I like what we call traditional square dance clothing, but it's not traditional. I think that word should be taken out of it completely. It's the current square dance uniform, which is sorely in need of modification. Because in the 1950s, when it came into the fore, a hoop skirt and a crinoline, you could not get younger people into dancing because they would not be seen dead going out in a prairie skirt or a pantsuit, because this is what was being worn, was the hoop skirt, the crinoline, the bobby socks, and the low flat shoes, or the heels with the flat shoes. That's where the adaptation of that came from. And it is a relative, well, modern being, almost 50 years, or more than 50 years now. But we've got to let that mindset go. We locked ourselves into a program. I believe that, yes, we do need to adapt.
At
need
that
to let
time,
people be comfortable. However, I think that the forcing people to say, or giving this bullshit, excuse my language, but bullshit excuse that younger people don't want to dance because of the clothing, that's wrong.
That's
Because
absolutely wrong.
I look at the dances, as I said, I did one here. They all got dressed up just for an open dance in skirts and crinolines and cowboy hats and Western shirts and everything else. Even though I didn't really do any big country music, people like to get dressed up for an event. They're going with what their perception of it. And there was long skirts, there was country skirts, there was pantsuits, there was girls in jeans and buckles and everything else. Whatever they wanted, they were having fun, but they all got dressed up. That's what you want to achieve by saying, my most abhorrent memory, and I think I've told this story, is I had a shirt without a collar. It was a fancy, like the one I'm wearing now, but it was a dress shirt. It had the studs that matched the vest I was wearing. It was a very expensive outfit that I had on. And they were turning dancers away because this lady had surgery on her legs. It was her first outing, and she had scars down her legs. So she wore pants because she was embarrassed about her legs. And they turned her away, her and her partner, because she was not in proper square dance clothing. It was a couples dance. They had a dress code. And so I immediately went up and I started packing up my equipment, because their clothing dress codes had a collared shirt with a scarf or tags with and it was so specific that I started folding my equipment. I says, unless you let people to come in and dance, I'll have to leave because I don't meet your dress code. We've got to stop locking people into that mindset and say, come as you want. They will put the clothing on it. As Bob said, 3 weeks, in 5 weeks, I'll put it on. As Mickey was saying, they get used to, here's what it is. It's an encourage. It's not forced. Take away the forcing and the trolls of, the Fifth Reich of square dancing, SS square dance clothing, excuse the analogy, but that we have prevailing through a lot of places in Canada and the States, to use that example of, you must do this or else, and let them come. They'll find their own way. You provide the medium for them to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I just watch square dancing videos on YouTube, and you'll know why people aren't interested in learning how to square dance.
Yep. And yet you'll see a lot of dancers, a lot of them with younger dancers having a ball. And those videos are few and far between. I noticed that at a dance, I'll be right with you, Ross. I noticed that at a dance recently. 2 dancers left the activity because they were pointed out, selected, and everything else. Good dancers. They stopped coming because, it's so good to have young people in the activity and a video, and everybody was photographing them and making a comment about, young people, you're so young, it's great, it's good to have. Are you going to learn to call? Are you going to bring your friends? Talk about pressure, as opposed to, I'm just a dancer here to dance. But when you look at a video, who are they filming? We're going to get the television camera down here, and you've got 15 squares on the floor. They'll pick, and I hate to say that, the square with the octogenarians in it, the elderly and everything else, and the whole focus is on the older people square dancing. This is a seniors activity. That's what the media portrays it as. Well, my wife, who doesn't dance, has a bunch of old fogies walking around in frou-frous. That's what it's perceived as. She doesn't like square dancing, and I don't blame her the way she was treated at the first activity that she went to. She supports my hobby, but I'm not going to force her to square dance. If she chooses to come later on, I hope she'll be entertained. But they soured her so badly. That's exactly what we're doing to the nation, because we're treating people like crap as dancers and as callers. And I'm not talking individual, I'm just talking in general. We're not a welcoming activity anymore. We're a forcing activity that says it's fun, friendship and fun set to music. It's not. Anybody can dance anywhere in the world. You can't. It only takes a couple of weeks to learn, and then you're a square dancer. No, you're not. You're not treated that way. You're not welcomed. We lie to our dancers. Bob, I loved your example earlier. The reason they were successful, and the reason you had success, you told them the truth and you told them why. You didn't lie about it. That makes a difference. Ross, you had your hand up earlier.
People have this obsession that square dance outfits are outdated and puts people off and everything. But have you looked at rock and roll? Rock and roll wear very similar outfits, and that seems to be accepted by the society. So think about that. But I do have a question. When you're doing a singing call, you were talking about basically adding your patter in on your singing call. We have a lot of elderly dancers that have trouble hearing, and I try not to use too much patter. I'll use a little bit every now and again, but I actually get the ones that have hearing trouble come up to me and say, you were really clear. We really enjoyed dancing to you, or we wish we were up on your tip.
Yeah, I
because
get that.
we clear you, but the other callers, to differentiate between what's patter and what's movements, sometimes they had trouble with. So
I get
do
that
I
a
keep
lot.
going as I am or not?
Yes and no. If it's successful for you and your dancers love it, yes. If that's what works for you, absolutely. You're not wrong. If your dancer's enjoying it, you're not wrong. Where the distinction comes to is in a singing call, you'll get a song. You may think I'm talking foolish. You've heard that I'm wild and I'm free. I'm singing. If I go, we'll hit two couples square through, get four hands and find your corner, do-si-do that girl. That fits the 2/4 phrasing, because what I'm actually delivering is meeting the metering of the song. But if I have my whole delivery exactly the same as my song, some of that could get lost in the phrasing when I start getting into more complexities of some of the choreography. But if I do, we'll hit two couples square through, get four hands, find that corner, do-si-do. That little pause, that little phrasing still keeps in the phrase. That little bit of emphasis differentiates between the calling, the delivering of that call, and the musical phrasing. It's still on musical phrase, but it just differentiates between the singing, and I'm still singing the lyrics and the meaning. In most singing calls, that work is done for you in the way that that singing call is learned. Where if I do the same thing and I go, if the music's on dee 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 dee, and I go head square through, do-si-do, that's the difference between talking and delivering a song on phrase and calling a song on phrase. One is a lyrical interpretation that matches the beat, matches the phrasing. It's not talking. Sometimes you do need to do it, but that's done as an emphasis. It's done deliberately. So singing calls are not really where the issue lies, unless somebody's going head to couple square through, get four hands around. Now that's wrong. When we switch that to patter, there's a difference. And you get this all the time. Diddle-deet, 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 diddle-deet. If that's my rhythm, you get head square through. Do the right and left through. Dive through. That's not working. But if you get head square through, and to get 4 hands around you go. Do the right and left through. And you're matching that to the lyrical instrumental rhythm. You become part of the instrumental, but the emphasis is on the delivery of your call. And that's where you're not actually singing, but you're chanting with the music. You become part of the instrumentation, and your voice becomes the lead instrument that's being supported by the music. So you're part of that rhythmic song. You need to try and achieve that in both the delivery of the patter and the singer. So when you do talk, it's done for emphasis. When you do emphasize something a little different, it's done with a purpose to build that excitement, that anticipation, or that execution wow factor. And it's like square through 3, slide or left, box the gnat and roll promenader. That part may be said, but it flows so well into, it brings all of those things together that emphasis, that change in the delivery enhances the dancer experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think I'm calling like a robot as such. Like I might say, boys run Ferris wheel. Like I'll do that sort of thing. So I will use my voice. But if I put the extra bits of patter in, which I do every now and again, but just small, it's just I've got that comment. So anyway, John watches me all the time, so he can give me feedback on that. But it's
one of the things. Yeah, in the session, I said one of the things was some callers use a lot of rhyming schemes. Some callers use a lot of filler. Some callers use a lot of lead, and it's redundant and everything else. And that's why I said after that, there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with using filler to fill in your pattern. There's nothing wrong with using rhyming scheme. That's why it was called a patter, because head square through was the call. And to get 4 hands around you do, that was the pattern. And all of that worked together to blend in to make a delivery. So that's why it's called patter calling, or because it's patter. When you do that, great. When you do it and it takes away from your delivery of what you want the dancers to do, that's when you have to be very judicious and critical of yourself. If your patter is overwhelming because swing through, get a 2x2. If you're forcing yourself to say that and you're doing it to keep your own beat, to take that beat away, and it's detracting from the dancers, that's when you have to rein it back. But you're the only one that can make that by honestly reflecting on your own performance. Getting people to listen to you objectively, excellent. Having somebody like John or Joe listening to mine, or Bob listening to mine, coming back and saying, yeah, Mel, I really like that singing call you did, but you know that bit where you talk the middle of this song? That sucks. Try doing it like this. Well, I'm not going to be offended because I know Bob knows what he's talking about. And if he tells me I didn't like that, I'm going to say, okay, well, I thought it sounded great. Get up and dance it. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, he's right. That the way I delivered that probably did suck. I have to rethink it. That's the kind of thing you need to have your own objectivity, but you need somebody else to be brutally honest with you sometimes.
I don't mind honesty. If I'm doing something wrong, if no one tells me, I'm going to continue to do it wrong. So I like that criticism. I might be weird that way, but I do. Sometimes I do the pattern in my head. Like I might do it for timing, and I'll just say it to myself in my head, and I won't say it out loud. So
sometimes when I'm calling to a new dancer class, I go, head square through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll count out loud, just like a drill sergeant. I do that to get them moving on the beat. I don't do it all the time, but you find your own way. Everybody has different techniques and different things. And as I've said many, many times, what Guido does, what Bob does, what Mickey does, what Joe does, or any of us, if it's working for you and your dancers are dancing it and they're enjoying themselves, you're doing it right. If I say, oh, you're doing that wrong, don't do this, but your dancers are doing it and they're enjoying it, they're learning, they're having fun, you can easily say, Mel, I appreciate your comment, but you know what? Your backside sucks canal water. Say it. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about, especially to the newer callers, I mean, we really have so many of these things. you know, the pro of the Zoom caller education series and all is that there's any topic almost that you want, it's covered. We go a bit too much in depth maybe for the newer caller. The con is that it it takes years to get to this point. Okay, and a lot of what we're talking about here is showmanship. And you know, how do you describe showmanship? Well, it's your personality. It's your own personality. When I see dancers on the floor dancing, I see them having a ball. We're having a good time. I engage them. A good caller will do this. You laugh with them. You don't make them laugh at you necessarily. Yeah, sometimes you do. You know, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a singing call, you know, like I don't want to cry this early this morning. By the middle break, you better be starting to cry. By the end break, you better have that handkerchief out and be bawling your head off because I don't want to cry this early this morning. You know, that kind of a thing. So, you know, you have to rip away your pride and your focus on yourself and be a nut and have some fun.
I can do that.
Yeah. Now, the difference between singing and calling and the delivery is that's a whole application.
Just to clarify, in 2 weeks, Joe's going to be presenting on that here.
Well, I have a lot of showmanship things, even with the teaching that, you know, we all have our little things.
He doesn't know it yet.
Wait, and I think we can all learn from each other things. I picked up something from Steve Edlin from Canada. This isn't great dancing, but he did tag the line, face any way you want. Go up to the middle and back. That's showmanship. It's not dancing, but you know what? The dancers love it. They like it. There's all kinds of things you can do. But if you have the feeling that they must dance for you, you're in the wrong business. I heard a caller on tape one time. He was calling, it was challenge level. He's calling all this stuff, and apparently the dancers are breaking down left, right, and center. And his comment was something on the tape of, I worked my butt off to write all this great choreography, and you dancers just kill it. And I thought, who's he calling for? He better revise his idea of what he's calling. Now back to the idea of presentation. One of the callers at the convention here, he did, it's a beautiful noise. What a beautiful piece of music. And he did a fantastic job. He started out nice and casual. He built it. And when he got to the beautiful noise, he was belting it out. Towards the end, he started talking softer and softer. He could not sing to that song and sing the directions at that point. No sense in doing it. He was giving the directions, you know, head square through, you know, right and left through, whatever it was, veer left, Ferris. He got softer and softer. The floor, they could hear every single bit, and they could hear that beautiful music in the background. And then when he got to that end, he just belted this out. And those dance, you know, like I was up next. You know, I had to peel him off the ceiling. You know, it's like following women and pets and yodelers. You know, that's why I was never liked. I yodeled. Okay. So there are times when you will speak the words. That's the commands. You sing the verse, you sing the song, but many times you
Now,
speak the verse.
many of the aspects that you're talking about, Joe,
Mhm.
when we talked about timing, when we talked about delivery, those are the physical, mechanical factors. Showmanship is that ability to deliver and perform all of those factors in the delivery of your choreography. And I'm actually quite serious because I've seen a couple of your presentations. If you would love to give a presentation in a couple of weeks, you're more than welcome to. I'll extend that invitation. And if you can, great, because I don't have anything scheduled for 2 weeks from now. But
I have a question to Joe.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Asking for help. You said with that cry till early morning and with the handkerchief, and by the end, you know, you should cry your head out, right? I've got a singing call called Champagne. When is best doing that? And when drinking the champagne and being totally drunk in the middle or at the end of the night, or
If you watch a couple of videos, Randy Doherty used to do that.
The old winemaker.
Drinking champagne. He also did
L.
Little Old
Stevens
Wine
did
Drinker
that.
Me. And it was a whole show and presentation. He used to come into a dance, and he pretend he was the cleaner, bumping into dancers, pushing a cart, all sorts of things like that. Your song, I Don't Want to Cry This Early This Morning.
Yeah.
I don't want to cry this early this morning. I put the music on, and then I'll call something out. Well, I had 2 weeks vacation coming, so I figured I'd drive down to Florida and visit some friends, and I'll get that real deep drawling trucker song. But it's the same record. Again, that's showmanship.
Yeah.
The way I do that, that's the song Roses for Mama. And it's one of those, if you actually listen to the lyric, it means I'm going to take my fist, I'm going to shove it through your rib cage, grab your heart, twist it, and pull it out in front of you, because you're going to go, oh God, what are you saying? It's that emotionally thing.
There we go with a thing like showmanship, because I'm preparing a session within 2 weeks for our color group here in southern Germany, and still before that, or let's put it the other way, that is art. Entertaining and showmanship, that is art. And there is no right or wrong. It's either like or dislike, offending or not, or whatever. But before that, you never have to forget that before you go into the art, you must master the craft. We got to know our choreo, how to handle our hardware and software tools, which we need. And then all together we put that, and then how we sell it, how we appear, that is what entertains the people. And where we have, I think, to put the emphasis back again.
Yeah. And a lot of what you're saying is in terms of the presentation I gave today and all the presentations on each one of those factors, those are the tools. Now, you've got to learn to use the tools in order to build the house.
Right.
You can't just build a house, say, here's a bunch of tools and whatnot, go build a house. And it's like when I was in Western
and then
Sahara.
If I may interrupt, if you build the house, it's a house, but then you have to make it a home, and then it's comfy.
Yeah.
So
I think the difference is we're expecting callers at a collar school or brand new callers to understand where we're coming from. And I use the example of, we had a bunch of Gurkhas, which are hired Gurkhas, are the soldiers from that part of the world that came. They were hired as drivers for the UN mission in Western Sahara. Only 3 of them prior to coming to Western Sahara had ever been in a vehicle, let alone only one of them had ever actually driven a vehicle before in their life. But they were the people that were brought over as drivers, and they had to be taught how to drive a vehicle. But that's what they were hired as. Well, that's what we're hiring callers as. We're giving them all the tools, we're giving them all vehicles, but we're not teaching them how to drive and to drive effectively, and essentially the same thing. We're doing that with callers. We're throwing all these tools at them, but we're not taking the time to explain how each individual tool works, letting them learn and use that tool on how it was designed, and then learning how to put 2 or 3 tools together to achieve a different goal, and then using them all to achieve a different goal, and then getting into, as you say, the finishing touches, the drywalling, the painting, and building a house, then putting furniture and making it a home. It's a long process.
But here's the $1 million question. How can you teach that? And I think you hardly can teach it except if you work on a 1-by-1 basis. Just an easy example. If you get 10 people and let them tell the same joke, you see what the outcome is. Some of them may gonna sell it, others may not gonna sell it, and it's the same thing with calling.
What that boils down to is, and I can actually answer your question, that $1 million question, I can actually answer that question. So send me $1 million and I'll be in touch. Okay, so picture all of us standing around a campfire, and Guido says 3, and we all start laughing. And Joe says 15, and we all start laughing. Bob says 22, and we just crack up. And I come in there and I say 37, and you can hear the crickets going and the tumbleweeds rolling. And I asked what was going on, and it was essentially, well, we've been calling for so long, we know all the corny jokes and all the puns in the world related to square dancing, so we've just cataloged them with numbers. So we all know what everybody's saying. And then what I don't understand. And Bob says 37 and everybody cracks up laughing. I said, well, I just said 37. Well, that's when Joe will look at me and say, well, some people can tell a joke and some people can't.
Right.
That's part of it too, though, is the fact that some can, so you give them the tools, which in showmanship and presentation, you give them those tools. We watch other callers. We say, oh, hey, what Mickey did, that's great. I'm going to try that. We try it and it falls flat. Well, it's not our personality, perhaps. Perhaps it's not your personality to act like a drunk on Little Old Winemaker, or to cry on, it's too early to cry this morning, or whatever it is.
That's this.
So, it's up to each individual to try their best. And when we do these things, what we're going to want to do is, if we do something like, if I research something, say for Mickey, because he did this thing. In fact, I did Mickey. There was a square messing up over to the right side there at convention, and they were doing things, and I referred them to them as my R&D group. They were working on a new call. They got the biggest kick out of this thing because you had mentioned this. That's my R&D group. They're working a new call, and I looked at them and I said, by the way, have you come up with a name for that? No. Well, they did. They came up with a name. So, but I said, I got that from Mickey out of Germany. I give credit where credit's due. You know what that does? It cements a feeling of giving and sharing. And we play together. If we play together, the dancers are going to notice it and give them confidence that we're in it for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got another one.
Mickey does the same thing in that, if he's calling and whatnot, and he calls something that doesn't work, he says, I got that from Mel in Australia.
I do that.
Now,
So
what you're saying is exactly what I was saying earlier. When we talk about choreography, remember I had the ingredients in the shopping cart, the recipe, all of that bits and pieces and everything else go into the preparation, the practice, the delivery, and everything else before you serve it. The serving of the meal is the showmanship. That is the part that everybody sees. They don't see what goes into the background. And it's so much more important than just regurgitating. And it doesn't matter how good the choreography is, if all you're going to do is regurgitate and you don't know how to prepare it and present it, it's just a bunch of chewed up ingredients spit in a bowl. It has exactly the same nutrient value. It has exactly the same component parts. It has everything else the same, but it's not as appealing and it probably doesn't taste as good because you're not getting.
That's what Joe was talking about earlier, wasn't it, Joe? You said that I forget what the numbers were. 80% of the callers were just regurgitating, reading their material straight off a piece of paper.
And I honestly don't have a problem with a caller that will read material. I don't have a problem with a caller that will have on, a bunch of zeros and equivalents or whatever as part of a focus on a computer screen down there, even calling basic. I mean, I know they do it at higher levels because it's a lot more awkward. I don't have a problem with that. As long as that caller's focus is not on the piece of paper, it's on the dancers. If you're looking at it to refresh, great. If I'm looking at a singing call to refresh myself on the lyrics and I've got them up on the screen, great. But it's just like you'll see even the big name singers, Garth Brooks and the rest of them, they've got little teleprompters down on the screen just to remind them, because they've got so many songs going, just to remind them of the lyric now and then, to twig into their minds or the band, because there's so much, but they don't need to look at it. They've done it so many times. They refresh and they watch the crowd. They play the crowd. They're part of that experience. Somebody said this a while ago, and it's absolutely true. How many dancers are in a square? 9. There's not 8, there's 9. There's 8 dancers and 1 caller in every square. And that's the way that 9-person team works. How you use those tools and what you make, that's showmanship, that's delivery, that's entirely up to each individual. And that's what the beauty of this activity is. We've all got the same tools, we've all got the same ingredients, we've all got the same knowledge of how they're to be used, but what we build is individual and unique. And we let everybody experience that. And that's the difference between going out to a restaurant or coming home for supper at the end of the day. That's the difference between a club and everything else. And you know what? You could go to a restaurant and share that meal with the same person that prepares your food at home. It'll be a completely different experience. That's what this activity is about. And that's what we got to get back to.
I got one more thing. I got one more thing for Joe. If you have dancers going there dancing and you have one square once in a while break down or faking it or you know, kind of going through it, but they're having fun or whatever, and then at the end of the tip you could say to the others, you did excellent dancing, really liked it, you were perfect, but you had the most fun over there.
Yeah.
and were most entertaining, right? So
Yeah.
everybody gets their share of being gelobt to be Guido, what's
Praised.
praised and being praised, okay, within their thing. So, and then everybody cheers up again. So, and it does work, you know, if it's with a positive atmosphere. Yeah, you got to sell it as everything.
You know, our own personal
Bye
presentation.
bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
See you later, Bob.
How
Bye,
we
Bob.
look as well. You know, take a look in the mirror once in a while and see, do you look like you're happy or do you look like you're not happy? Some people, they look pretty mean. And one of the guys at the college school, not tremendously experienced, many years of calling, but he walks into a room and it lights up. He walks on the stage, it lit up. He had the guy's probably about my age. He appeared to be much older, but but his smile and his eyes, it just the he could have called really lousy. Nobody cared because he presented fantastically. He did a beautiful job. I hate him because he had a nice deep voice, which which I don't, which I wish I had. But his smile, his laugh, because of that deep voice, I don't care if there was 50 squares on the floor making a racket. If he laughed, you heard him, and because of it, everybody else would start laughing just because they wouldn't know what they were laughing at. But it's contagious.
It's true that some people, I mean, everybody has an aura, right? But some of them have a real big aura, and there is a little saying like, you know, some people don't enter the room, they appear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can get that, you know, like, because you're much on the road, you have to deal with people. If you have a positive attitude, then you can gain that, you know, with experience, with knowledge, with intelligence. And it comes from the inside, from the heart, from the soul. Yeah. It's not what you do on the outside. It's comes from the inside.
I was told I have two faces when I'm interacting with people and when I'm concentrating at work. And when I was told at work, I have what's called, excuse the expression, but a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
I had never heard that before, but it's just I'm just focused. And I was told I got a resting bitch face. Oh, what? But, you know, yes, Ross.
Yeah, what you're saying about presentation and that, I went to a concert and John Farnham was part of the concert, an Australian, I don't know whether you've heard of him.
He's a singer.
Yeah, Australian singer. But when he came on the stage, he had the people eating out of his hand just from the first word. He just knew just his mannerisms and that. Yep. He'd already worked the crowd and done nothing.
He didn't play the music, he played the crowd.
He played the crowd. Yeah, and he didn't really do anything. It was the expression, just walking on and just one word, and he had the meeting out of his hand. But one other thing about expression is I teach dog obedience, and we had one girl that in a dog trial, her dog wouldn't bring the dumbbell back to her and she kept failing. And she said to me, "What am I doing wrong?" I said, "Let me have a look." And I went, "With that expression, I wouldn't bring my dumbbell back to you. Will you smile the next time you go in the ring?" So the next trial before she went in, I went, "Smile." And she passed. So even the dog could read it. So if a dog can, not that they're all dogs out there, yes,
So
you do.
I've got two questions here. The first one deals with an aspect of showmanship. Joe, you mentioned a tag the line, face any way you want. And I saw a few eyebrows raised on that one. What do I do after that? I've actually used that. Tag the line, face any which way you want. Ready. Those in the center with your hands joined, trade. All the ends trade. Tag the line, face in. Well, what have I done? I've done absolutely nothing. All I've done is tag the line, face in. It just changing that. But it feels so different because if you do tag the line, those in the center with your hands joined, trade. Well, it doesn't matter if you're facing opposite directions or facing the same directions. They take hands, they trade. Ends. Okay. If you're facing a direction, trade. Well, everybody's facing a direction, but some are going to trade opposite. Some are going to do a partner trade. Some are going to do an inside trade. And they're all watching everybody else's square instead of their own square when they do their part. It feels so different. But what have I done? I've done tag the line, face in.
Mhm.
Something like that. And as you said, it is not comfortable to dance. It is terribly awkward to dance. It's not good body flow, but it's pure showmanship.
Yeah.
And little things like that will work. The second one I was going to say is, Joe, I've seen some of your presentations on showmanship. I was actually being very serious because I've been trying to get a hold of you, but your emails are breaking out. Did you want to give a presentation on showmanship in a couple of weeks if you're free?
Sure. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'll book you in.
Okay.
Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yep. Am I muted? No, I'm not. I was going to say the problem that comes up when you do showmanship lectures and what have you is that it's a little bit we talk about trying to bring out your own personality and whatever, and but I think what happens to some callers, some beginners, I guess I should say, is they'll, or maybe some more beginners, you give them an example like that tag the line gimmick or something like that, or a very particular joke, a particular joke, and then
37.
right, and what happens is they write that down and they don't kind of get the idea. So they walk away going, showmanship is calling the following sequence, tag the line any which way you want, and this funny catchphrase that I once upon heard somebody say, things like that. They because at that level they're still in the sort of the mimicking stage, the not really understanding what they're doing in a sense, and they're just sort of trying to copy everything. So then of course they go out and try to do those things and they can't really pull it off, and it's a joke that everybody knows that Bob over there is the one who always tells that joke, and now here's Timmy trying to tell the joke, and it's not that. So I mean that's the writing down little points, not really, you should be making up your own jokes, right? This is kind of a tall order. And so anyway, that's just I'm not really sure what to do about it, but that's just something I see happen sometimes.
Sometimes I'll write down things, but I won't necessarily use them now. It might be in later on, but actually thinking about that might actually work with our dancers, because half of them don't know the left from right, half of them don't know the ins and outs, but they haven't done tag the line yet anyway. But it might be interesting looking at things from a different perspective. So I don't know. What do you think, John?
And the other thing is they're not going to know that it's funny once, or that it was funny once a year or something. It's those kind of judgment things are sort of difficult to explain to people who don't naturally who don't naturally have those kind of interpersonal or social crowd skills, or whatever you want to call it. I don't have great ideas about how to bring that out. I don't really know how to teach that, but that's
I can show you how to do that. Chris, I can show you how to do that easy. Just send me, like Mickey, I'm doing it for him. Just send me $1 million.
Well, you know, somebody was talking about headlines the other day, and these outrageous headlines that are designed to get you upset, and even by credible, supposedly, news sources, and they'll say, you know, blah blah blah, up to, you know, some big number of things, and the person's comment was up to means less than. I have up to $1 million in my pocket right now.
Well, like I said, I'm working on my second million now because with Mickey sending my first, I've completely given up on my first million.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you haven't made that first million by the time you're 25, you really better start working on the second one.
It boils down to the adage. There was how to make $100,000 quickly. Okay, send me $10 and I'll give you my complete book on how to do this very quickly. So you send me $10, and the guidance in the book says, get a bunch of fools to send you $10 each. That's essentially what it is. You have to sell your personality. Nobody can tell you what your personality is. And everybody, I mean, I could do the surveys and the assessments to tell you what kind of personality you have, whether you're a high D, a high I, a high S, a high C. If you want to go Briggs & Myers, if you want to go phlegmatic, if you want to go DISC, whatever behavioral model, I could actually do that and do a complete personality profile on each and every one of you if you wanted to do that. That's not going to help you. What is going to help you is identifying your own personality and then learning about how personalities work, to being able to visit other people's personalities. If I wanted you all to help me paint a fence, now Guido's a high C. He's the Mr. Spock, the details, dot the I's, cross the T's, look at all the details. Roz is a high S. She's the, I really don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to be noticed like this and this, but if ever there's a task to be done or anybody ever needs help, I will be there from the start. I may be a little slow to start, but I'll be there with the end to fill you in. Joe's a high D, high C. He's interested in the details, but he's also a doer. He's dominant, he's direct, you know. Much as I hate to say it, Joe, you like to be in charge of things. You know, it's just your personality. Okay. And you go through this. Chris is a C, but he's also a high I, which says, you know, if there's a party, Chris is not going to ask, what can I bring when is it? He's say, who's going to be there? What are we going to do? I want to have fun.
What I didn't get
So
that. What was it? High I? I think
Yeah.
it's one I, but
no. and you know, you've got this. Now, all of these things, if I wanted to get you all, none of you wanted to paint a fence, I would say, Joe, I got to get this fence painted. You're going to help me. He's going to say no. But if I approach Joe and say, Joe, I got to get this fence paint. I got 4 other guys, but you're really good at organizing. Could you give me a hand and get everybody organized to it? Joe's going to look, hey, I'm in charge. I'll be there. I'll help. Guido, I'm going to go to Guido and say, Guido, I've got this fence to paint. It's 26 meters long. It's 2 meters high. I've got 4 cans of paint and 3 guys. I think we can do this in about 2 hours. And Guido is going to look at this fence and he's going to say, no, it's 27 meters long. It's 2 meters high. You're going to need 6 cans of paint. You got 4 guys. It's going to take you 2.5 hours. I say, I don't think so. Guido's going to be there to help me paint the fence just to prove me wrong, because that's the way his mind works. I'll go to Roz and say, Roz, you're going to help me paint the fence. She's going to say no. But if I say, Roz, I know you're really busy, but you're really good at painting, and I really appreciate your help. I could really use it. I got this fence to paint. I got these guys help me out to do it, but man, it would be so much better if you were there because you do such a good job. Roz has been recognized for her talents.
What are you crawling for?
Yeah, her Roz have been, you know, that's her talents, her skills, but it's recognition. And that's it, just recognition that she has that value and is able to contribute. She's going to be there. I go to Chris and I say, Chris, you're in charge. You say, nope. Chris, I got this. No, I don't care about the details. But if I go to Chris and say, geez, Chris, I want to go to a party tonight with you and, you know, have a few, tell you what, as soon as we get this face paint, hey, give me a hand. You paint the fence, we'll go out and I'll buy the first round. Chris is going, free beer, I'm there. That's approaching people as to their personality. As a caller, you've got to learn to identify the base personalities of the people you call for, both individually and holistically in a crowd, and visit that mob mentality and that individual mentality to get them to interact to you. And you can do that through your stage presentation, your showmanship, your own delivery, because they will become your best friend. And as callers, you'll notice this. You'll go to a floor of people. 10 years later, you'll go to a dance. People that you met 10 years ago and had a brief 2 or 3 minute conversation, that was something that stuck in their mind, important in their mind, because you had that relationship. You visited them where they are, and they'll talk to you and say, wow, this guy is doing this. I'm going up to talk. I remember, hey, do you remember me? I was at this. And you'll go, yeah. And I have absolutely no idea who they are, because that was 10 years ago. We had a 3-second or a 30-second conversation as part of a dance. I met 150 people at that dance and had personal conversations with them. I have no idea who that person is, but they'll remember
Mel?
you. Yeah.
I really have to admit that the last 3 minutes of this whole session's been the best I've had in the last 4 weeks, whatever I had to do in the last 4 weeks. And I'm really thankful about this. And this means when I ever have something to do in the house, all I have to do is call you, because you know a lot of people how and what to do. I think it's just great. It has
Mickey,
been wonderful.
I will tell you right now, if you want to paint your house, okay, and I'm absolutely serious. If you want to paint your house, I will call Guido and I'll say how big your house is. I will call Joe to organize it. I will call Roz to help, and I will call Chris to come and help the paint. You pay for our tickets to come over, and I
we have a
guarantee
ball.
they'll all help you paint the house, and I'll buy the first round at the pub.
I'm also really getting a lot of out of this sage advice too, but I was wondering, now show me sand the floor.
Now show you what?
Sand the floor.
Sand the floor, same principle applies.
And then wax on, wax off, and
You can
paint the
always do
house.
it. You can always do it the Aussie way, and you don't have to worry about the personalities. You just say, come over for a barbie and we'll supply the drinks. You're going to paint this and you have the drinks after.
You know, we all
Don't
can
give the
combine
drinks
it.
before.
Apparently
We all
nobody
can
saw
combine
karate.
it.
Kid.
You
Oh,
just
well.
come over to Mindpack next year, and we can. I pay the beers.
One pack.
All right. Well, ladies and
Hang on,
gentlemen,
what was that, Mickey?
That's
Mindpack?
Mindpack. That's the following. We're preceding the former IPAC. We took
Yeah,
that
so
over,
IPAC's
and
not
it's
on
called
anymore.
Mindpack now. All right.
Thank you, because I've always wanted to go to IPAC.
Okay.
well, ladies and gentlemen, it is past 11:30, which is usually my time crunch on these sessions. By all means, I can leave it open if you want to carry on the discussion. I encourage you to carry on the discussion if you so be, but I'm going to have to pull pin here. Pull pin means I'm going to have to get going because I've allocated just a certain amount of time on a promise. But I'm really, really happy. Joe, thank you very much. I sent you an email. Hope you got it, but I've got you booked in for 2 weeks from today. That'd be your 24th. We can carry on this discussion on showmanship and look at different aspects. Mickey, that gives you 2 weeks to come up with $1 million that Joe and I can split between ourselves. And thank you very much, everybody, for everything, for participating and coming on in. And yeah, encourage new callers. There are some fabulous resources out there, absolutely fabulous resources to look at these aspects. Right. So when you get a new caller and you encourage them to go to caller school, also to encourage them to go to the GSI sessions, to the sessions put on by Don Beck, the sessions here, and do that individual coaching and mentoring, because the 30-second soundbite of a caller school on just this aspect and then being expected to do it is what's taught at caller school. And the focus is too many times in the wrong place. It's on choreography because that's the curriculum. Callers are expected, especially new callers, are expected and required to go and learn this stuff for themselves and put in the hard yards. That's an expected model. Unfortunately, that model doesn't always happen. And we all know that. Everybody prefers the Coles notes as opposed to actually reading the book, if you understand my expression. Everybody prefers to have somebody else write the essay and submit it with their own name on the top because it's cheaper to pay and regurgitate than it is to actually do the work. We are having these discussions because we all believe in the activity. We want to further the activity, and only we can collectively fix the activity, which is got, it's not completely broken, but it is severely damaged in a lot of ways. And we can only do that if we get ourselves on the same path and get the dancers involved in this discussion. Sorry, I had the word ich werde. I become. Oh, reference to the movie.
Mel,
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. When does Don Beck has his next session?
Don was going to have a session today. Don still does his sessions weekly if he can get his presenters up, or if he's not presenting himself. Last week, they did not have a session because it was an American holiday. This week, he had a conflict with a booking, so he had canceled this week's session. What he had in conflict actually didn't happen, but it was too late to actually do it. So he's just taking a 2-week holiday. He should be having a session again next week.
He's,
Okay, but how
got
does
a,
he?
He's got a mailing list now. He has a
Okay,
mailing list for doing the announcements.
Yeah,
like-
Don has been posting it. Don and Dan Lake have been posting it and the link in Facebook.
Okay, I don't
It's
have Facebook.
It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, well,
static.
that's why they finally got a mailing list. So if you just send
Give
Don
me 1 second.
an email, yeah, and then he'll put you on the list. That way you can get the weekly announcement.
Okay, thank
Give
you.
me 1 second before you go. Come on, where are we? Dan Lake, Don Beck.
While he's looking that up, I've got a question for Joe. Joe, you were going to, you've probably done it now, you were going to do a session on basically where you're not a good singer and how to do that in the singing call. Have you done that session? I think you were going to put it on Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that was, I did that with Don Beck as part of the music presentation.
Right. Is there any way that that could go to Mark Hart to go onto OC Caller's website at all?
I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Mark has a link to that already.
Yeah.
Mark
Yeah,
puts up a link. to all Don's
everything
sessions.
goes on that OC Callers website. Everything goes. They have all the videos. Everybody's.
So that one would be on there now?
Yep. And if you want to have a look at, you can also contact Dan at Flutterby. It's on his site as well. I've just posted in the chat the link to Don and Dan's session. It's as I said, it's a static link. And he's at currently 1 a.m. Sydney, Australia time. So you guys can figure that out, what his time is. I think it's 4 in the afternoon his time or something like that.
No, his is 9 or 11 his time.
11 a.m. his time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So figure out whatever the time zone is, but that's the link. It's a static link, the same as mine is a static link to Don's sessions on Sundays.
Yeah, because I've been checking. Usually I'm on the road from a dance or whatever, but I was checking and I couldn't get access. But if the meeting was canceled, then I understand.
Yeah. So I posted that. If you just copy that, put it in a Word document or send it as a text to yourself or something, you'll have the passcode, the phone numbers, the dial-ins, various things. Those dial-ins are all from the States, but that passcode, the meeting ID and numbers are all still correct. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, sorry. Did you have something else, Joe? Or were you just saying goodbye?
See you in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Did anybody want to stay and have me leave the chat room open? Otherwise, I'm going to get going.
Man.
All right. I'll close it off. Thanks a lot, everybody. And good to see you all again.
I'll
Bye.
take care. Bye-bye.
I got a quick question,
Bye-bye.
but I'll ring
Oh,
you.
yes. Go ahead, Roz. Was that for me or for
No,
John?
I've got a quick question for Scotty, but I'll give him a ring.
Okay. No worries. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.